Good evening. Welcome to City Hall, to tonight's ordinary meeting. We've got a large group in attendance, which is always good to see, but it's important that we do respect the environment that we're in and let everyone go through the proper process, and we be respectful as we do that. So that's very important. We've had huge galleries in the past, and we've always had good cooperation with the gallery and the general community. It's always worked well, so hopefully that's the case this evening. We'll see how we go. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land which we're gathering this evening. That's the Wadawurrung people, and pay my respects to the elders past and present. Are there any apologies to be noted this evening? None at this stage, thank you. Confirmation of the minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of August 2019. I've moved Councillor Mason, seconded Councillor Murray. Those in favour, those against, thank you, they are carried. Declarations of conflicts of interest. Are there any to be noted? Councillor Manane. Item 3, okay. Just let us know when that arises. Now, just before we go any further, I just need to let you know that in relation to our live streaming that we have in the chamber, this meeting is being broadcast on the internet, and the recording of the meeting will be published on the Council's website. As a visitor in the public gallery, you may be filmed, and by remaining in the public gallery, your consent to being filmed and for the recording of you to be made publicly available by the Council. A copy of the Council's live streaming recording of Council meetings policy is available at the back of the room, and it's on the Council's website. So please speak with one of our staff members if you have any questions in relation to that. Our next process is introducing our junior mayor, Josie Horn, who's been with us for most of the year now. And I'd also like to acknowledge we've got junior councillor Erin, Elkin and Logan with us this evening, so welcome. They've been working on a number of projects during the year, and they also have the, I think Josie will touch on this, but the Youth Summit, which is coming up on the 31st of October, which will be held down at GMHBA Stadium, I believe. So we may hear a bit more about that, but I'm going to hand over to our junior mayor, Josie. Thanks, Josie. Yeah.
The mayor's permanently, Josie.
Thank you. Okay. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge the Wadawurrung people, the traditional owners of this land, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, as well as acknowledging all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people present this evening. Good evening, Mayor Bruce Harwood, Greater Geelong councillors and directors, youth councillors and guests. My name is Josie Horn. I'm the Junior Mayor for the Greater City of Geelong, and I'll outline what the Youth Council has achieved since my last presentation on the 23rd of July. We have clarified the key themes that will be explored in the Geelong Youth Summit, have attended drop-in groups in our own time and contributed to young people's uses of social infrastructure. Finally, I will highlight the Youth Council's stance on climate change and protection of the environment due to recent events. One of the main priorities for the Youth Council during the past 2 months was to help decide on themes, format and date for Geelong's inaugural Youth Summit. To clarify, our Youth Summit will be an open public forum that invites the youth of Geelong in the community to attend and provide feedback. We wish to do this in an interactive and fun way to gain the most accurate feedback that we can. The purpose of Geelong's Youth Summit is to be an engaging event where young people will identify local issues that matter to them and contribute possible solutions that the Youth Council will consider and then potentially recommend to the Geelong Council. The Youth Summit will be focusing on our priority areas, which include mental health and wellbeing, environmental sustainability, and community safety and homelessness. And we will raise these issues in a hands-on and casual environment. We want to empower other young people through demonstrating that they can make a positive difference, highlighting that this summit will be a place in which ideas will be manifested. The more ideas, themes and solutions that are discussed at this event, the more information the Youth Council can use to recommend projects to improve the livelihoods of as many young people as possible. The Youth Council, the Youth Summit, will focus on the local implications of these issues, rather than the large-scale problems. For example, rather than educating young people on climate change, a global issue, we will aim to address ways in which every young person can limit their carbon footprint in achievable ways such as saving energy, using reusable packaging and composting food scraps. As well as this, brainstorming sessions will be run to find solutions to pollution, littering and native species at risk. These are actions that we can change as individuals to help support the community. From these workshops, another outcome is to find solutions that the Youth Council can build upon and then propose as a recommendation to Council. We are all very excited about engaging with the community more, and through this effective engagement, we can make change. We have finalised a date for the Youth Summit, which will take place on Thursday, the 31st of October. Along with this, the format of the day will consist of 12 working groups, each led by a youth counsellor, with 4 groups per issue. Each group will then narrow down and specify what part of the issue they would like to focus on, and find solutions for that specific issue. Each year, the City's Youth Development Unit facilitates more than 320 drop-in programs in 7 locations across the region. Your Youth Council thought it would be fitting that we should go out into the community and interact with other young people within our wards. So we proposed and organised to attend drop-in youth groups within our wards. Each ward went together to focus on their area, and it was an extremely positive experience, both as a young person and as a youth counsellor. We met some amazing people from different schools and told them what we do as youth counsellors and how we can represent them and bring forth their views. Yet what we were most proud of was meeting our peers and talking to them as friends. From these relationships, we are proud to say that we feel as if more young people are now aware of the Youth Council and feel safe coming to their local member to raise any issues they may have. This increased awareness of our roles in a positive and personal way to all people present at that centre. Attending these groups is a vital outing and one that we hope will continue in the future. In our last meeting, we learnt about the importance of social infrastructure in the Geelong community and what that big word actually means. We gave feedback on how young people use social infrastructure and what the needs of youth are. The Youth Council highlighted the importance of safe spaces, public transport, accessible sports centres and free facilities, and how these are some of the many spaces that are vital to young people. Finally, the Youth Council have acknowledged Section C on tonight's agenda, which has been available online since Friday the 20th of September. Due to recent events, the Youth Council would like to highlight the view of young people regarding the broad issue that Section C is addressing, action against climate change. As a junior mayor, my role is to convey the views of young people to Council when relevant to the conversations that Council will undertake. The view of the Youth Council and the youth of Geelong is in support of timely action to limit the consequences of climate change. Evidence for this contention has been illustrated numerous times in our municipality, as seen in the gallery tonight. But it was exemplified by Geelong's School Strike for Climate, which occurred last Friday. An estimated 2,500 people attended, comprising of mainly young people who live around Geelong. It is the 3rd School Strike for Climate that has occurred in Geelong this year alone, with participation increasing each gathering. As a youth council, we are all concerned about climate change and have had frequent conversations about it prior to the gathering that occurred on the 20th of September. Climate change and the preservation of the environment are issues that the Youth Council and our communities are seriously concerned about. The School Strike for Climate is further evidence that many young people throughout the city of Greater Geelong support this as well. As such, the Youth Council would like to highlight that our stance is in support of action against climate change. As a young leader in the community, it is my role to highlight these facts to Council so that tonight and in the future you can consider our views in discussions and decisions regarding the protection of the local environment. To conclude, my next report to Council will be on Tuesday the 19th of November with another update on our work and any potential recommendations we may have. Thank you.
Josie, and I think you get a... Thanks, Josie. Is that better? You get a good sense of some of the topics that our junior councillors touched on and sat around and had some pretty mature discussions and debates about. So they've been a fantastic addition to our council this year. I'm going to go to public question time, and I just want to let you know we will be raising the Section C notice to follow on from the public question time. We'll have that flow from public question time into the Section C notice of motion. Now, just before I go to question time, we've had considerable question times in recent meetings. We've taken a number of questions in relation to the climate emergency discussion and climate change in general, and we've had many emails, texts, phone calls and correspondence sent to us as councillors, and we've all received that correspondence and information, and we clearly understand the message that has been brought forward. So what I'm getting to is I'd like to avoid having the same questions over and over and over when very shortly after public question time we'll go straight into the notice of motion. So I hope everyone understands where I'm coming from with this. It's not to try and stifle any questions, but to understand that we don't need to have 5, 10, 15, 20 people coming up and basically making the same statements of information that we have got. We clearly understand the message, and we've got it over in large volumes over recent times. So I'll just make that comment. I'm going to start with Mr. Andrew Morris. I'm going to start with the questions that were sent in prior. Mr. Andrew Morris. Is Andrew with us this evening? If not, we'll take his question on notice. He's not there in the back? No? Okay. We have another 9 questions that were sent in that are all related to the climate change emergency discussion. Now, if you wish to come forward and ask your question, that's your right, but I'm going to try and keep it to our 3-minute limit if possible. So if that's respected, I think we can get through them, those who wish to, although, as I say, the first thing we're going to do after the question time is to go straight into the notice of motion, so please take that on board. So a question we have Marie Fagan. You don't have to ask the question, I'm just... Yes, Marie. So just before Marie speaks, all questions or comments on the climate change emergency discussion, I will simply respond by saying that will be discussed in the notice of motion.
Hello, my name is Marie Fagan. Dear City of Greater Geelong councillors, I would like to have my say on the urgent need to declare a climate emergency. According to ABC News, dated the 8th of the 9th, 19, out of 1,960 people surveyed, 81% of 18 to 34-year-olds said climate change worried them compared to 67% of those aged 55 and over. Clearly, the younger generation who will inhabit this planet after the older generation have died off have a greater right to be worried and to demand climate action. I am of the older generation and I'm proud to say that I believe in man-made climate change and that a climate emergency declaration is not only the best policy for the planet, but to not do so is a dereliction of our duty of care to leave the planet in a livable state for future generations. This declaration goes beyond the City of Greater Geelong. It is necessary for worldwide action and to join the growing concern worldwide about the future of the planet. My questions are, will the Council listen to the climate change science and the learned environmentalists and declare a climate emergency as soon as possible? 2, will the Council join with other councils worldwide and recognise and acknowledge that we have a global crisis that needs urgent action? 3, when the climate emergency is declared, will the Council work with concerned groups on ways to implement the climate emergency declaration? Thank you.
Those questions will be answered in the debate. Thank you. Our next submitter is from Sonia Van Hewitt.
My name's Sonia Van Hewitt, Mayor Harwood, councillors. Words are really important because that's how people get an opinion of what we are and who we are and what our beliefs are. Words are very important in Iceland. When the increase in the tourist trade happened, people were actually going and swimming in the glacial lakes and dying because it's 1 degree. So instead of having the warning, danger signs, they put up signs in Iceland. Do not swim, you will die, there is no chance of rescue. Since that time, nobody has had to be trolled out of the glacial lakes. Code Red is there for a reason, because emergency, extreme fire danger wasn't working, but people know Code Red means we are in trouble. Words are everything. So your choice of words with the way you actually express how the council are going to be going forward with this is really important. The word emergency indicates not only that you are serious about it, but that all of the constituents in this council and in this municipality also understand that you're serious and maybe there is something to worry about. So my question is, please, will you use the word emergency in all of your correspondence, in all of your terminology, in all of your speeches, in all of your answers regarding anything to do with climate action in the city of Greater Geelong?
Good question. Our next question is from Alan Barley. Is Alan with us this evening? Thanks, Alan.
Thank you. I've just got 5 quite succinct points to provide a context for my single question. I'm obviously no longer a school kid. I'm almost an 80-year-old dad and granddad with a background in science, chemical and plastics manufacture and renewable energy. That's who I am. I've been tracking the mounting multi-strand evidence of human-induced damage to the climate and to habitat for more than half my life. We're now out of time. As then 15-year-old Greta Thunberg tellingly puts it, we need to act like our house is on fire, because it is. Over 1,000 cities and municipalities, now being joined by entire nations, have voted for and declared a climate emergency. It's possible to take emergency action. We've done it before in wartime. It's no longer safe for you guys to vote for business as usual. That's voting for a hugely disrupted and dangerous world for my kids and my grandkids and yours. Be on the right side of history. So my question is, as rational people and as individual community representatives, how informed are each of you about current climate science and its projections, and from what sources are you getting your information? Thank you.
Next question is coming from Monica Koha. Thank you, Monica.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Monica Koha. I'm a Geelong resident, a final year medical student at Deakin University, and a member for Doctors for the Environment Australia. I'm speaking as a representative of Deakin medical students and Australian medical students, many of whom attended the Global Strike for Climate last Friday, alongside approximately 300,000 Australians and 4 million people worldwide. As future medical professionals, we are particularly concerned about the health impacts of climate change, which are disproportionately suffered by vulnerable populations, including the young, the elderly, our First Nations people, and our Pacific Island neighbours. These health impacts include increasing respiratory illnesses, heat stroke, and dehydration. Already, we are seeing these impacts of climate change in hospitals across Australia, including Bowen Health. Overwhelming scientific research and leading medical bodies around the world agree that the health impacts of climate change are substantial and undeniable. This month, the Australian Medical Association joined the American and British Medical Associations to declare climate change a health emergency and urge their federal governments to heed to the science and take substantive action. Now, Australia is currently the world's largest exporter of coal. Opening another large-scale coal mine in Queensland or elsewhere will only accelerate the climate change and worsen the health emergency. Therefore, we second Dr. Mansfield's motion to declare a climate emergency, as we believe this declaration recognises that Australia's efforts have been inadequate and that we urgently need decisive, unified action at all levels of government. So as a member of the Geelong community, I would hope that the Geelong City Council consider implementing safer climate policy with the following objectives. So number one, moving away from fossil fuels to aid in reducing emissions by 50% by 2020, as per the motion. 2, supporting local sustainable initiatives to increase renewable energy production and usage, which is something that Geelong is already doing and that we're really proud of. And number 3, supporting the just transition of workers in the fossil fuel industry by creating job opportunities. So my question tonight is, what actions and promises will the Geelong City Council take to implement safer climate policy and secure the health of Geelong's future generations? And how can we, as members of the community, work together to achieve this outcome?
Next question is from Ron Fletcher. Thank you.
I'm a mental health nurse by profession, although recently retired, so I'm an ex-mental health nurse. My main concern, well, one of my main concerns is around the impact on the community, on the people. We've already seen all over the place, all over the country, suicide rates going up amongst farmers because the drought, which is not stopping, is wiping them out all over the place. So, yeah, we need to be looking at what it's going to do to our population. So my questions are mainly around the impact it's going to have on the Geelong financially, because that's a large part of our... So, first question, as many scientists now see that there's little or no chance of reversing climate change, and if we accept the science, we're going to have at least a metre sea rise. Now, a metre sea rise in Geelong and the Surf Coast is going to be quite considerable. Has the council investigated or put into place anything to assess and reduce the impact of that sea rise? Second question is, does the council have any plans to restrict development on low-lying areas, which is a lot of our, as far as I understand, our current development areas? And if not, has council sought any legal advice regarding who will be liable if those places end up under a metre of seawater? I've seen reports from I haven't seen one from Australia, from other countries, where the councils have been held liable because they allowed that development to happen. So, yeah, and although areas like the Surf Coast are out of this council's area, what's going to be the impact of the Bellarine Peninsula, for example? A metre sea rise basically turns Queenscliff into an island from, Leopold down to Ocean Grove. If you look at the projection maps, if you add a metre of water, right across from Leopold to Ocean Grove is an island. So all of our tourism from that is going to go for a large part of the year. The Great Ocean Road's going to flood in God knows how many places. So all this is going to impact on the Geelong community, because where do people stop when they come down when they go down the coast? They stop here, they have their lunch, they buy their food for their day out, they fill up with petrol and so forth. So yeah, well, while there is petrol. And that's it, basically, yeah. What are we doing about supporting the people?
Your comments, Ron. Thank you. Our next letters came in from David Phillips. Is David with us this evening? Thank you, David.
My name's David Phillips. Thanks for the opportunity. The word unprecedented is being used to describe daily climate activities around Australia and the world. Unprecedented bushfires occurred in Queensland and New South Wales in August. Unprecedented overnight temperatures were in Victoria recently. Unprecedented floods in Queensland in January. Unprecedented coral bleaching of the Great Barrier Reef in 2018. Unprecedented drought conditions in rural Australia. Unprecedented heat in Central Australia last summer with 18 days of 45-degree plus temperatures. And this is not considering the worldwide issues of floods in Spain, fire in Canada, and even in the Arctic. Only this week, the idea that residents would move away from Alice Springs permanently was floated. There is little encouragement for the redevelopment of failing rural towns by encouraging people to move there if there is no water supply. At least 4 towns in New South Wales are expected to run dry by November, and this includes significant towns like Dubbo. Only today, Stage 3 water restrictions were announced in Dubbo to start on October the 1st and Stage 4 in November the 1st. Our boundary river, the majestic Murray, received 901 gigalitres inflow this year. Sounds like a lot, but compared to its annual average of 5,000 gigalitres, that's only 20%. On September the 1st this year, the Geelong Advertiser published that Barwon Water warns of water future worries amid the drying trend. The Geelong region will need to find additional supply of water within 10 years. My first question is, will the Council acknowledge the extreme climate events we face across the region and the nation and support the declaration of a climate emergency? I know your answer. You're dealing with it later. From another point of view, many leading national business bodies are raising the issue of climate change. BHP left the World Coal Association in 2017, and in July of this year, 2019, the CEO of BHP, Andrew Mackenzie, stated, "Society's combustion of fossil fuels and industrial processes like steel making and agriculture have released greenhouse gases at rates much faster than any other time in the geological past." Westpac and Telstra are questioning the stance of the Business Council of Australia on climate action. Commonwealth Bank will not fund the Adani fossil fuel project in Queensland. The group Farmers for Climate Action are a group of hands-on farmers across wool, wheat and sheep, grain cropping, beef cattle and grazing from WA to New South Wales to Tasmania. Their mission statement is, "We believe if we organise farmers, graziers and agriculturalists to lead climate solutions on farm and advocate together, we can influence the government to implement climate policies that reduce pollution and benefit rural communities." Tonight I'm asking the Council also to advocate to influence state and federal governments to do more to address climate issues and to keep the increase in the Earth's temperature to less than 1.5 degrees. I'm asking that you provide hope to ratepayers, hope to the community, hope to our children, to farmers and to business. My question is, will the Council act on behalf of Geelong businesses, Geelong regional farmers and the wider community and show their concern for the future in the Geelong region and give us hope by acknowledging the climate emergency and by declaring a climate emergency?
Thanks, David. Our next question came in from Dr. Joe Centra. Is Joe with us this evening? Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor Harwood and fellow councillors. My name is Dr. Joe Centra. I'm a local resident and paediatrician at the University Hospital, Geelong. Thank you for the opportunity to address the Council, also as a representative of the hospital senior medical staff group and the Geelong branch of the Doctors for the Environment Australia. Our senior medical staff group is particularly focused on the public health co-benefits of climate risk mitigation. Scientific evidence is clear regarding the public health risk for further delays in policies to reduce carbon emissions and develop broad and rapid sustainability actions. These risks have been well described by health organisations around the world, in particular the Australian Medical Association, the American Medical Association and the British Medical Association. In response to reports from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and the weight of evolving, worrying data, the Lancet Climate Commission concluded that responding to climate change could be the greatest health opportunity of the 21st century. I call on the Geelong Council to be part of the leadership group in the Australian political system and incorporate evidence-based climate risk analysis into all policy decisions henceforth. Every council decision must account for sustainability analysis, whether regarding waste, transport, energy use, air quality, urban planning, local agriculture, water plans, natural environment and habitat protection. When these issues are outside local jurisdiction or influence, we call upon Council to represent these concerns to state and federal government. Many concerned citizens have approached the Greater Geelong City Council demanding a declaration of a climate emergency as part of a national and global push for urgent, decisive and cohesive action on this issue. The global strike for climate across the world and in Geelong last week demonstrated the strength of local citizen concern. We add our voice to this momentous global drive towards evidence-based policy that will help build a healthy future for our community. We call on our local government to declare a climate emergency and to join Climate Council's Cities Power Partnership program. The importance of the term emergency infers that with urgent action it may be possible to restore a safe and healthy climate for future generations. Will the Geelong Council act now and comprehensively on this urgent matter? Thank you.
Okay, so my name is Tina Thorburn and I once again call on Council to act and declare upon a climate emergency. There are now 53 jurisdictions across Australia who have declared a climate emergency, which is 8 more than the last time I sat before you 2 weeks ago. 53 jurisdictions representing over 22% of our population. The main pattern here is that number keeps rising each time I sit here, you might notice. Throughout my life, I've had many different roles and hope to continue to do so. This is true for all of us, but tonight I'm sitting here as a parent and more specifically a mother. I really want you all to look at everyone in the chamber, around the room tonight, see all the parents, see all the mothers and see all the young people, the young women who have not yet had a chance to make a decision about having children. You can look, they're there. See these women who would like to have the opportunity to make that choice. We all know there are no certainties in this life, and given the uncertainties we already face, I wonder how many of you tonight will choose to add to those uncertainties for all of us. I also wonder how many of you are prepared to look at not only me, but every mother in this room, every woman, every parent, in the eyes and tell us our children don't matter. Are you prepared to face your own children and tell them their futures don't matter?
Thank you, Tina. Our final question has come in, been forwarded, is from Monica Winston. Is Monica with us this evening? Thank you, Monica.
Hello everyone. Thank you for your devotion to your work. I'm sure you work really hard for this region and are doing what you think is important. Why is the word important? The word emergency. I've worked for 12 years, mostly voluntary, in this sector, and I was a founding member of Geelong Sustainability Group. I now coordinate Transition Streets Geelong, which is about individuals taking responsibility for reducing their average ecological footprint of Australians, which is 5 planets. However, we need support at all levels. Why is the word important? Because vested interests are running the biggest disinformation campaign in history. Okay. We saw that in the election. We have a federal government who's in the US meeting with Donald Trump while the UN climate talks are on. It is absolutely appalling. It's corruption at the highest level. By avoiding calling it what it is, we avoid having to deal with it. This is still going on. The general population do not know how bad things are. They don't know that we could be facing mass starvation in 10 years. The earth is already too hot. Populations are disappearing of different species, and humans are on that list of extinction. The mass extinction of species started before 2008, that's when I first heard about it, when I was delivering a workshop called Changing the Dream Symposium. It's been going on since 2008 at least. I now propose that there is so much information out there about what is going on and what's needed, all the solutions are there, that people who deliberately go in the opposite direction or fail to act are not accelerating extinction, they are accelerating extermination of populations and species. It is time we called it what it is and get a plan into action, and I want to know how Council is going to really ramp things up, because I know you've had a low carbon growth plan. It's not fast enough, it's not deep enough, it's not at a big enough scale. Are you going to call this what it is and tell the truth to the population who've been lied to by various politicians who've been funded by fossil fuel companies? Both the Liberal and the Labor Party have received the same amount of funding from the major fossil fuel companies. Are you going to tell it how it is and give the population a chance to have a say and get some real action?
Thanks, Monica. Thank you. I'm going to open up the floor now to questions from the floor from anyone who would like to ask a question, but please, you clearly understand we've had 10 questions now or comments. We do understand where you're coming from. We do understand the sentiment, so I'm just going to open up. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Alex Marshall and I don't want to be here. I'm 19 years old. I should be studying or working or hanging out with my friends or hungover or something like that. But I'm here. And I'm here because this is a matter of will I have a future or will I not? We have all of the resources and the capabilities to adequately address this emergency. The one thing we're lacking is political will. That's what we're lacking. That is what is needed to decide whether or not I'll have a future. My question is, before I go to my question, we have all the resources and capabilities, we just need to be brave. This council needs to step up and can be part of the movement in that political will that is the decider of my future. And if you can't be brave, you have to be able to look me in the eye and say that you do not care about my future. My question is, will this council decide to be part of that political will that is deciding lives? Thank you.
If there's other questions, yeah, please come forward. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Councillors. I'm Vicky Perrott from Geelong Sustainability, and I'm here on behalf of our many members and thousands of supporters, as well as my grandchildren and all of their grandchildren and children. I'm not going to repeat all the things that have already been said, and as you say, you'll be discussing them in the motion. But you can see that you can sense the frustration from the community about the lack of action at all levels of government, and clearly state and federal have more responsibility in this area than local government. But that said, under the Local Government Act, it is the role of council to provide governance and leadership for the local community through advocacy, decision-making and action. So we call on you here tonight to show that you are a forward-thinking council, like your 30-year vision, which as a vision partner we had a part in helping to come to fruition, and as did the community. You have a 50% reduction target for your own operations, but that's not enough. That's less than 1% of the region's emissions. What about the rest of business? What about the community? As a grassroots community group, We have been doing what we can, leading our communities, but it's far beyond what a voluntary group can do. We need to work together, all levels of government, with business and the community, to drive the level of community and urgent response that's required. There is the existing low-carbon growth plan, but not much of it is being enacted. So there is a roadmap for action, and so I urge you tonight to vote in favour of Councillor Mansfield's motion. We think a positive vote will come to define your term on council here. I'm not going to repeat some of my questions because they've been said by other people, but I would like to say, will council acknowledge the very high economic, social and environmental risks from an increasingly unstable climate? And will council commit to set an ambitious date by which it will be a city region which is carbon neutral, which is in your vision statement? And similarly to the Mayor's very positive leadership when it comes to the current recycling crisis, will council put upward pressure on state and national governments and advocate for a fast and fair transition to a low-carbon circular economy? As Sir David Attenborough recently pointed out, what we do in the next 10 years will profoundly affect the next few thousand years. That's all.
I think I've got Sue coming down, then we'll come to this young lady in the middle there. Thanks, Sue. Sorry.
Yes, hello. My name's Sue Bull and I'm a Geelong resident. I don't want to repeat all the things that have been said tonight because there's been some incredibly eloquent points made. And I've got a fairly simple question, but it's a question in line with all the things that we've seen essentially this weekend from Friday right through, but for many, many months beforehand. And it's about young people. And it was so fitting that the person that opened today was a young person. I think this council believes in youth. And I think this council believes in a future. So I'm hoping like crazy that you will pass the climate emergency because it opens up so many possibilities. What I'd like to know, and my question really is about young people, and I would like to know that whether you pass the motion or not, and I've got my fingers crossed that you do, will you be prepared to fund projects for young people to do with the environment? Will you resource young people so that they can continue to put forward incredibly important demands and issues around the climate? I think that's the role of a council, and I'm hoping that you'll be prepared to do that. Thank you.
Thank you for taking my question. My name is Heidi Full. I'm a sustainability consultant in Geelong. I like to be working in Geelong because there's some fantastic businesses in Geelong. I would like to hear if you today are going to help me and a whole heap of very talented people that works in the sustainability industry to work for a future in Geelong. The World Resource Institute say that the sustainability industry is worth $29 trillion, and I think that we've got a number of empty locations in Geelong that we can fill up with some of those industries. Thank you.
I'll go this side of the room to Andy, then I'll come up the back there. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you, Mayor and Councillors. My name is Andy Medic, Member of the Legislative Council for Western Victoria, and I'd like to say congratulations to Councillor Mansfield for this excellent motion, and I thank her for having the fortitude to bring it before Council. This council already believes in climate change. That much is obvious from the things that you've already done, the actions that you've already taken. What's required now is the next step. Sat behind me right now is the single largest political emerging demographic in the country. People who are coming out of university and out of high school and turning 18 years old. They will hold not only this council but state governments and federal governments into the future accountable for what they do on the climate emergency. And let me speak to that for just one moment. I pay attention to the science. I believe in the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. What they're saying is that the 1.5 degrees is not enough. We're concerned about a rise of 2 degrees. That 2 degrees is the point of no return from which we will then begin to accelerate. That is now 20 years away, according to them. If that is not an emergency, I don't know what is. Now, these young people emerging behind me will hold us all accountable, councils, state governments and federal governments into the future. If we don't do what they are asking, they will not only vote us out, they will come up and they will form these governments and they will make those changes. And be very aware that they are galvanising, they are united, and they may well also make the legal changes necessary to hold us all legally accountable for what we didn't do. This council has a proud history of being progressive and being a leader. I implore this council tonight to once again be a leader, to be a beacon, to be a lightning rod for the councils of the Western region of Victoria, to lead the way and introduce and vote for this climate emergency motion, and to work with these other councils to formulate policy that can be implemented across the board to combat this emergency. Thank you.
Thank you.
Just popped a picture of my granddaughter up there so you can all look at her eyes when I read my statement. I see through my own...
Can I just have your name, please?
Oh, I'm terribly sorry, Judy.
Thank you, Judy.
Thank you. I see through my own eyes the devastating effects of climate change. I remember as a child playing under the sprinkler. Water was not an issue. Now there are towns in New South Wales with zero water. I remember chasing butterflies en masse, squealing with delight at the sight of caterpillars hanging from the trees. When was the last time you saw these creatures in your garden? We make up just 0.01% biomass of all living things, yet are responsible for the loss of 83% of wild mammals and 50% of plant life through deforestation, for agriculture and development, amongst other things. We are so privileged to live on a planet that sustains us, and this is the only one that can. But like gluttonous, greedy beings, we have exploited, culled, eradicated and abused all the resources this earth has offered for our own selfish needs, giving nothing by comparison back. Now, sadly, our children, including my granddaughter, will pay the price. The most brilliant learned minds on the planet have spoken. Scientists, academics, naturalists. I'm certainly not arrogant enough to ignore them. So my question is a simple one. Who here denies climate change and the catastrophic consequences it brings?
Thank you. Thank you, Phil.
Hello, Mayor Harwood and councillors. My name's Phil Bolsh. I'm representing Transition South Barwon. We need to declare a climate emergency, but my question is more about how council will respond, having made that declaration. To meet the climate emergency challenge, we're going to need to reduce energy and materials throughput in our economy by more than 50%. And that'll mean a number of significant changes to the ways we live. One of them will be how we source our food. And I believe we'll need to bring our food production close to home, very close to home. My question is the same question I asked back in April at the April Council meeting. What land has Council set aside for urban and peri-urban agriculture so that we can seek to meet our own needs for food in the post-carbon world. Thanks.
Thank you, Phil. Okay, how are we going? Any further questions or comments? If not, okay. We can do that.
Hello, my name is Nikita Page. I am 18 years old and I live in Ocean Grove. I describe myself as a daughter, a sister and a friend, and I'm actually very emotional about this topic because I've been to the climate strikes before, but I couldn't go on Friday because I had to choose between striking for my climate and going to a practice exam. Now, I'm in year 12, and honestly, year 12 is stressful, but thinking about where my climate is in 10 years is more stressful than that. And I just, I don't want to have to be seriously thinking about in 10 years, do I want to be bringing children into this world? Because I don't know where it's going to be. So my question is, why am I here today? Why has this policy been knocked back? And also, are you going to continue to make young people like me choose between their education and just living in a world that's inhabitable, because we are the people that are going to be inheriting this world?
Thank you.
Evening, councillors. It's just to...
Just your name, please.
Oh, sorry, Lucy Coughlin.
Thank you, Lucy.
Just directed to you, Mr Harwood. Yep. You began your speech by saying, please be respectful to the environment that you're in, directed to all of the people behind me and myself. But I'm just wondering, what actions are you going to put in place in order to respect our natural environment?
Yep. Thank you. Can you help here, please? Microphone to her, might be.
My name is Ingrid Hindell, and I would just like to remind councillors what my t-shirt is saying. If you look at my t-shirt, you'll understand my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ingrid.
Just read what that t-shirt says, Jake.
If there's no further comments or questions, I'll go to... Is there one more? Righto, sorry. Okay. Would you take a seat, or just your name, please, as well, thanks.
My name's Jacqueline Edge. My questions are not directly about the climate, although I am utterly impressed by the comments and questions to this time. I'm here for Elizabeth Street. I started this conversation with your team in 2015 with Councillor Michelle Hegney. This time last year, I presented you with a petition from 79 people that live on Elizabeth Street. Over the last 12 months, we've made 6 formal presentations to you and your team regarding the safety and shade of Elizabeth Street in Geelong West. Throughout this period, we've had countless meetings, telephone conversations and email correspondence with your councillors and senior management team, to no avail. The result from our original effort was, I quote, "We agreed that Elizabeth Street could benefit from coordinated redevelopment to improve pedestrian amenity and safety." Now, this neatly links in with the rest of the group's concerns about young people and trees. Since this time, we have pursued various lines of inquiry seeking commitment from Council to act on these words of agreement. However, not one of these efforts have resulted in a commitment of action from Council in any form. The most recent responses to our lines of inquiry are dismissive of our concerns. It seems that Council do not understand the gravity of this situation. Elizabeth Street is a black spot road that creates a high-risk environment at certain times of the day, putting pedestrians, including young people and school children who are walking along the side of the street, commuters, residents and property at risk. So today I'm here to present you with another petition. It's not a petition of signatures. This is a petition of anecdotal evidence. So residents along the street have taken the time to write messages to share with you their experiences of being in an accident, being in a near miss or witnessing an accident on Elizabeth Street. As you read through these, you will note the common themes are risks at intersections, agitated driving, safe pedestrian passage, school children crossing concerns and risk, and Sparrow Park access. As you read through, you may think to apply Band-Aid solutions, not you personally, but as a broader council, and there have been some Band-Aid solutions implemented. But this is not a way forward. What we seek is a holistic approach that responsibly and authentically addresses all of our concerns. This is the third time I'm asking these questions. I asked them at a budget submission and we asked them in August. What we seek from Council is a FY20 budget allocation to conduct the following: an environmental assessment and development of treescaping plan for Elizabeth Street and surrounding streets. We would like a safety assessment and development of pedestrian road user safety plan for Elizabeth Street and a committed budget allocation to resolve the design and implementation in FY21. These matters are not going away. In fact, the risks Elizabeth Street currently present are only going to become greater with the more development and more activity in our area. We need your engagement on this matter. We need your commitment for significant improvement. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacqueline.
I'm not going to go there this one. I want to get through the meeting. Yes, sir. And down the back, looks like. Yep.
Mayor Harwood and councillors. My name is Russell Vargo. My wife and I recently moved into Autumn Street in Geelong West, and we recently became aware of the action being undertaken by Jackie and her team for the shade and safety of Elizabeth Street. In the 12 months that we've been in this area, I think it's highlighted to us the dangerous activities that happen in that street, particularly at the crossroad intersections where people drivers try to intimidate people driving along Elizabeth Street. So the crossover traffic, they approach those intersections at speed, even though there are giveaway and stop signs there. They just ignore them and just push out and try and create issues. And there have been a number of incidents that Jackie's just shown where accidents have occurred. So I support what they're doing and the process they're trying to achieve. I'd also like to bring to attention a couple of other matters that I've noticed, and this is walking along Autumn Street towards Packington Street at the Elizabeth Street intersection. At that intersection, there is no means for a person with limited mobility parents with prams, kids on scooters or bikes to cross Elizabeth Street. It is a gutter, which you've then got to step down and go across the bricked pavement, which has been destroyed by Barwon water in recent weeks, and then back up on the gutter on the other side. The only alternative for people with mobility is to cross Autumn Street, which is a issue in itself because of the speed. People don't obey the 50-kilometre speed limit in that area. So there's danger there, and then you can't cross back onto the north side of Autumn Street for about a 60 metre distance. So you've got 2 crossings of Autumn Street to get to where you want to go, and it's a DDA issue. It's an occupational health and safety issue. And my question, I guess, following on from what Jackie has said, is has this problem been identified by council? And if it has, when is work likely to be undertaken to rectify this problem?
I'll take up the discussion with our Director of City Services after the meeting.
I have some photos there, if you'd like to pass them on to...
Grab those, that'd be great. Thank you. One more up the back here, looks like. Yeah, thank you. Yep, thank you. I'm sorry, I missed that.
My name's Diane, and I did one of the submissions, and it's not about climate change. So I didn't know when to actually come up and actually speak, because the theme very much so is about climate change, and I appreciate that. And but my concern tonight is something else that's in this agenda, and it's actually about the Northern and Western Growth Framework Area Plan. I have spoken to quite a few landowners in the Northern Growth Area, and what I found is that the neighbours, my neighbours, weren't really informed, and they didn't even know where to find the framework plan on the internet, which actually quite concerned me. What I found is that residents are not computer literate, and also their English is not very good. It's their second language. So obviously they're disadvantaged to understand exactly what's going and what is contained in the framework plan. My concerns, yes, I have seen that some submissions here have been presented, but a lot of these residents didn't even put a submission because they weren't aware actually to do so. But it does state in here that there were extensive community engagement meetings. Yes, there are open homes, but right from the beginning, I remember quite specifically the council was very good to have open round table meetings for either for the Northern or the Western Growth Area, and I found that to be very transparent. But later on, I found that, in my perception, is that the open homes weren't as transparent, and when you're dealing with people that don't understand English or not aware what these plans entail because they don't understand plans, it's very hard to allow people to know exactly what's going on. So in your agenda here, you quite state that you had extensive community engagements, you had quite a few open homes, and even in the minutes of March, you actually stated that you adopted the framework plan prior to even consulting landowners, which I was just quite surprised, to be quite honest about that, because I truly believed if we're going to be open and transparent, it should have been prior. And to have round table meetings and even interpreters for the residents. And none of that really happened, which I found to be quite disappointing. In saying that, I've been very ill and not being able to follow this and in time and the letter that we did get, another complaint that I have, which you state here that we all received a letter, but every resident received a different letter in accordance to the framework plan, which again one could interpret as misleading. And if I didn't come in and actually discuss it and go through the fine lines, I would have never figured it out. So let alone someone that doesn't speak English or read English quite well or whatever the issue. Now, and also the land acquisition, there is asterisks everywhere on the framework plan that if there is land to be acquired, we know that the Victorian government has compulsory land acquisition. It's compulsory. There's no negotiation. Unless you get lawyers, town planners, and then it just might move it a little bit, but not necessarily. My concern, and I propose, that considering really the residents didn't even get a chance to even vote on or be consulted about which precinct they wanted their land in, long-term, short-term, there was none of that. Also, considering the land's already marked, whether it's going to be future residential, whether it be 10 years away, 5 years away, I believe if there is going to be compulsory land, which we know there will be, it's quite clearly stated there, even if Precinct 1 does it, it quite clearly states that the other precincts have to give up their land. So I propose, considering certain land has been marked as commercial, I propose that the council does a memorandum of understanding with Vic Roads and with council and with other stakeholders that might be acquiring land, that considering it's going to be zoned that in the future, that they pay up the money to the residents in accordance.
Yeah, what I'm proposing is a direct contact with our senior planner, who's here this evening.
I've already done all that. And all that stuff that I've actually stated has not really been done in your agenda. I've actually highlighted all this.
Speaking this evening.
Well, I'm actually making it public.
Right.
That I propose that the council adopt a memorandum of understanding with Vic Roads and other stakeholders that could be acquiring the land, that if the land currently is zoned as rural living, but if there is land acquisition, that they need to then have a memorandum of understanding that they would pay up accordance with commercial or residential, wherever it's going to be, for the residents. For the residents. Right. I think every landowner needs to be aware of that, and I think the council needs to have that in place. Yeah. And also, I personally believe that there should have been more open tables and letting people know or even vote on which precinct they wanted to be in, and even have interpreters to actually explain it, to be transparent. And none of that's in there, what I've said.
Appreciate your comments.
That's my grievance.
I understand what you're saying. Do you wish to take up the offer to again speak with our senior planners?
Yes, I do.
All right, that will be arranged.
Thank you. And I think people need to be aware of what's going on.
I appreciate your comments this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I think we've got there with our question time. So, and I really appreciate the your patience and the respect given to everybody in the room with the questions and the way they've been asked and our understanding. We'll now move to section C, which is the notice of motion. Oh, sorry, petitions. Is there any petitions to be forwarded this evening?
Mr Mayor, I've received a petition. In addition to the petition tabled at the last council meeting here at City Hall with over 1,500 signatures from Break Free Geelong, there's an additional 304 signatures on the same matter, so calling on the City of Greater Geelong to declare a climate emergency.
Councillor Mansfield. And Jacqueline, do you have your petition there has been handed. Oh, thank you. If there's no further petitions, I'll go to our section C, which is our notice of motion, and I will go to Councillor Mansfield to move, and seconded Councillor Mason. Thank you, Councillor Mansfield.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As a doctor, one of the more challenging jobs is breaking bad news about a really dire diagnosis to someone. It's a skill that's taught carefully throughout our training and one we're always working on. A very serious diagnosis must be given with sensitivity, but it's vitally important that we don't soften things too much or give the wrong impression just because it's uncomfortable. The person needs to understand what the actual diagnosis is, no matter how hard that is for anyone to say or to accept. They need this accurate information so that they can make the right decisions about their treatment, their life goals and priorities, and so that they act with appropriate urgency. A person with a life-threatening or life-limiting condition needs to know that, because they can't walk away thinking it's something less serious, or that it might just be something that becomes bad in the future. Because if nothing is done, the outcome will almost certainly be poor for them, as they won't be making the right decisions about their lives going forward. The same goes with climate change. We have to call it what it is, as we've heard so many times tonight. It is now an emergency. And I'd really urge my fellow councillors to not underestimate how important this is to our community and how much words matter here. News about the worsening climate situation grows by the day, and it can be really hard to comprehend and to take in. Yesterday, we had yet another scientific report from the World Meteorological Organization which confirmed that climate change is actually happening faster than our previous predictions. Even if we meet our current commitments, and we're not on track to do that, we're facing 2.9 to 3.4 degrees global temperature rises by 2100. These temperature rises are incompatible with a safe climate for humans and most other species. We need to make our targets. When I say we, everyone needs to make our targets, all levels of government, at least 3 to 5 times more aggressive than they currently are if we're to have any chance of maintaining a habitable climate. The impacts of climate change are very real and already being experienced globally, and you just have to ask our Pacific neighbours for the really tragic impacts that it's already having there. But you don't actually have to look that far. They're happening right here in our region already. Several councillors here, and not all councillors were able to attend, but I know that the ones who were there with me will recall this. Bowen Water gave us a presentation where the impact of climate change on our water supplies was unequivocal. We will have insufficient water to meet our needs sometime in the next 10 to 30 years. The question was not if this was going to happen, but where we're going to find the additional water. We hear regularly from some of our residents, farmers and businesses who work out in the north, in the Yuyangs. I've been out there with some of them planting trees, and they can tell you about the impacts that climate change is already having on the water supplies out there, on the eucalypts and the nature of the eucalypts, and the koala populations. Increased frequency and severity of extreme weather is damaging properties, infrastructure, and it's affecting things like our insurance premiums. Fire risk is increasing. Anyone listening to the news over the last month will know that the predictions for this coming fire season are pretty frightening. The nature of our fires are changing. They're getting more frequent and more difficult to manage. The costs of food, especially fresh food and other essentials, is rising. I heard a report last week that food is now one of the number one expenses that people are having difficulty managing to afford. We've got 1 in 6 children in Australia that are relying on food from food banks. Farmers will be able to support this and tell you that it's having an impact. Climate change is having an impact on their ability to grow food. Doctors will tell you, and we've heard from some tonight, that extreme heat events are impacting on many residents, particularly those with chronic illnesses, the elderly, the very young, and those living in poorly insulated housing, which is many of our Geelong residents. Regular temperatures above 40 degrees leads to increased death rates, and these sort of temperatures are already getting more frequent every summer. We recently approved as a council a planning overlay regarding sea level rises that accepts that sea level rise is happening, and it will have impacts along a number of low-lying areas around our coast because they will be more at risk of inundation and storm surges. Climate change unequivocally poses a serious and urgent threat, and we as a council need to recognise this. The community have been asking us for some time now to join what has most recently become over 1,000 other jurisdictions around the world and declare a climate emergency. Since drafting this notice of motion over a week ago, even more Australian councils have done so. We now have over 50 who have declared a climate emergency, covering 6 million people, which is over 20% of the Australian population. So it's a great example of how collective action can actually have a big impact. We've had over 1,800 signatures on petitions calling for Geelong to join these other councils. On Friday, I joined over the 2,500 people who were marching on the streets calling for urgent climate action, and I talked to many who'd never participated in any kind of rally before, in particular parents who are being educated about this issue and inspired on this from their kids. They're looking to us to show some leadership and to give them some hope that together we can restore a safer climate and prepare for what lies ahead. There's never been a greater need for collective action. And look, I'm the first to acknowledge that each contribution may be tiny. The impact that the City of Greater Geelong can have alone is relatively small. But a huge mistake we make is in thinking that what we do doesn't matter. You'll probably hear that argument brought up tonight, that our contribution is insignificant. But what everyone does matters when it comes to climate change. We all grew up in an age of cheap fossil fuels, and our entire ways of life are designed around this. Change is therefore really hard. It's hard for everyone, and we are all going to have to make some big transitions. As a local government, we have an important role to play. We need to do this as an organisation, and given our role in the community and the levers we can pull, we can help to make this transition easier for residents in our community. No individual, organisation, no city, no country, no industry is entirely responsible for climate change. We all are, and therefore none of us can fix this alone. We have to act together. This notice of motion brought forward tonight recognises the work that we've done on climate change up to today, but it isn't enough. I'm asking councillors to support this motion, recognising that climate change is an emergency, and call on our CEO to work with the entire organisation to identify how we are going to elevate climate change as a strategic lens across everything we do. We also need to identify what resources are going to be required to achieve this. We need to work with other councils who've responded to the climate emergency and share ideas and develop partnerships, because we won't have all the answers. And we need to work with and empower our community to take their own actions. I'm also requesting that we join the Climate Council City Power Partnership Program as a major way to dramatically cut our emissions. We also need to review our emissions targets in light of current evidence. And this is probably the most difficult bit for me. As a mother, I can tell you I would give anything for things not to be as dire as they are and have just the usual parental worries about whether my kids will turn out okay, whether they're going to make friends, whether they're going to get up to naughty things, whether they're going to get a job, whether they're going to have a house. I would love if that's all I had to lie awake worrying about. I do lie awake worrying about those things. But like many in the community who've called on us to do something about this issue, I've been gripped by the overwhelming fear of what lies ahead for our kids. I know at some stage, the minute they can't say much other than more or bunny, but at some stage I'll turn around and say, given everything you knew, Mum, what did you do when you had the chance, and why didn't you do more? The young people in our community share this anxiety. This is the future that they are immediately facing. In a survey released yesterday, which was completed by over 15,000 Australians aged between 18 and 29, climate change is now the #1 issue for them by a long way, more than mental health, housing and jobs. We cannot ignore the seriousness of this. There is and always has been a tendency for adults and older generations to look at the next generation of young people for hope. They'll be the ones to right our wrongs and sort out the problems of the world. But with climate change, young people are looking at us. Everyone around this room, people in positions of power who can currently make a difference. It might not be a huge one, but we can make a difference. And because if we wait until these young people are in our positions, it's actually going to be too late. We heard tonight that the timeframes are 20 years. On most of my reading, the most optimistic estimates give us about 10 years to have any hope of maintaining a safe climate, or at the very least delaying the worst effects of climate change. The window is probably actually a lot smaller than that based on our current emissions. But the fact is, by recognising that this is an emergency, we are also recognising that there is still time to do something about this. If we recognise this as the emergency that it is and start making the transitions required as individuals, organisations, governments and industries, we have a fighting chance. I'll have a little bit more to say about this at a later stage, but I'd like to give other councillors the opportunity to speak on this matter. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really strongly support everything that Councillor Mansfield has said, and I'm going to try to reinforce her views without repeating too much of what she said. Mr. Mayor, today there's a climate summit. The UN has urgently called nations to gather to report on their new plans to mitigate accelerating climate change. Many people here tonight that are aware of that and are anxiously awaiting some of the results. And I do applaud the sentiments that have been expressed by the gallery tonight, the passionate and thoughtful questions, and especially applaud the sentiments of the Youth Council. Mr. Mayor, there is an existential threat on global well-being. To me, this threat reigns supremely, I say again, it reigns supremely above politics. Mr. Mayor, this is bigger than politics, and I appeal to all that this must be deeply a matter of conscience. For me, it's not only a matter of personal conscience, but a matter of professional conscience. It's a matter for global best practices in disaster risk management. Something I've worked in for very many years. We need collective, coordinated action from grassroots communities through to the leadership of nations. And we must address all of the causes and all of the effects. We need statesmanship and leadership at all levels to pull us out of this mess. Mr. Mayor, we should be ashamed that globally young people everywhere are reminding us of our responsibilities. I am proud of them. This is not the time for the politics of division and short-term gain for vested interests. I say again, my supreme interest is durable global well-being. For me, Mr. Mayor, I occasionally feel despair and exhaustion. This has been going on for me for 40 years. Not just the last decade where no government, and I say again no government, has been able to provide adequate leadership. It goes back to the 70s and 80s when, as a science teacher, I was already aware of the looming environmental threats of greenhouse gases. In those days, 40 years ago, the risk was low, and there was plenty of time to deal with mitigation strategies. Now look at the North Pole, floating sea ice. Since 1980, it's reduced by 40%. That's nothing. Nothing compared with the 2 or 3 kilometre thick ice on the continental Greenland ice and the continental Antarctica ice. This is also beginning to melt. We hear of 1 metre sea level rise and the adaptation strategies we've been taking on recently, this council. That 1 metre represents less than 1% of the melted sea ice. The melted continental ice, the ice of Antarctica and Greenland, 1%. That's the 1 metre. Science tells us that climate change and its effects has not yet become a cascading and irreversible process. Science says it will, unless we deal with the causes. Science tells us the risk of this is rapidly increasing. We've only heard that today reports come out that it's accelerating faster than ever before. We are in a race against time. In climate terms, this is an emergency. Science has spoken so often. It will take a long time to turn this Titanic around. In climate terms, and climate is not weather, in climate terms, time is running out. Mr. Mayor, it seems we will always have about 5% of our population that cannot accept science. Climate change sceptics will always exist. We must manage this because those very climate deniers have become a threat to our global and local security. Mr. Mayor, some of these climate deniers might be our friends, family or colleagues. We should be kind to them. We should love them. But we must gently get them out of the way. We must take the reins. We must show leadership. Mr. Mayor, I remain optimistic that science and with human spirit and resilience, we will overcome all odds. But just now, despite past efforts, no global risk reduction strategy, no effective global risk reduction strategy is being implemented. Mr. Mayor, what is happening is beyond natural cycles. Science speaks again. It recognises the escalating rate of climate change is human-induced. It's anthropogenic, meaning human-induced. This means that we can all remedy something we and our recent ancestors have caused. We are not fighting nature. We are fighting a human-induced problem. There are many countries talking the talk, but few, UK and Scotland are two, Tory UK and Labor Scotland, who walk the walk. Even they are striving to do more. We must also do more. Mr. Mayor, we effectively and collectively responded to the threat of the tyrants of the First and Second World Wars. Every family in every little town in this country contributed. Small countries around the world contributed collectively 40% of the response. My grandfather and my father both knew that. They contributed. They knew that every minute fibre in the cable adds to its strength. And I know it. And so does the wonderful young student Greta Thunberg, who spoke so well at the UN yesterday. And so does Admiral Chris Barry, past Defence Chief, who is calling for leaders to fill climate change and the leadership gap. Mr Mayor, the Climate Change Emergency Declaration is a call for action. It's a call for all people and levels of government to immediately work together in a coordinated and collective way, to work with other nations cooperatively, to achieve new goals, to do more than they are doing, to work to global standards, to mitigate the escalating risk of catastrophic climate change. Mr Mayor, time is running out to do this. Spoken for too long. Mr Mayor, global best practice disaster risk management practice states, by reducing the threat, by reducing the hazard, by reducing the cause and reducing vulnerability, you reduce the risk. These best practice disaster risk managements also state, by increasing resilience, increasing mitigation practices and increasing adaptation to the effects, you reduce the risk. All of these parameters require attention, not just to effects, but to causes. Mr Mayor, locally we are doing well. We can do better, and we've done a lot in COG, I must say, but we can do better. In Victoria we're doing well, but we can do better. We must at least solve the waste problem. Nationally, successive Australian governments have not done well enough, and I say successive governments. Worse, the UN has not granted Australia speaking time at the Climate Summit. Why? We cannot report on our plans to achieve globally stated goals. Mr Mayor, this is really an emergency. It's a climate emergency. We must act now, individuals, governments and nations. We can do it, and we can do it with confidence. We still have time, and we can reduce this terrible risk. And Mr Mayor, science has spoken. Let us listen and let us hear it. If we act now, it won't be long before we won't be alarmed anymore.
Voice activated, it is. I've got to say my heart is pounding right now at this moment. The energy and the passion in the chamber and the emotion that this really has discovered within me. So I want to speak now on this. Why are people all across the globe calling for their local councils to declare a climate emergency? Science tells us climate change is already leading to increasing temperatures and more extreme weather events, and is affecting sea level rise, patterns of rainfall and ice cover, and the behaviour of our ecosystems. And indeed, as part of the Year 12 curriculum, our children are taught the impacts of global warming in Australia and its effects, and those being significant effects on our water, our ecosystems, food supply, our treasured coastline, and indeed our health. And the World Health Organisation has described climate change as the defining issue for public health in the 21st century. It is an urgent challenge with implications at the global, national and community levels. Climate change affects health in many ways, directly by the increased intensity and frequency of extreme weather events such as prolonged heat waves, floods and bushfires, and indirectly through worsening air quality, changes in the spread of infectious diseases, risks to food safety and drinking water quality, and effects on mental health. Surely councils and in particular this council, has a leading role in responding to climate change and accepting the responsibility of caring for the community and the environment in which we live. I mentioned before, but the 2014 Intergovernmental Panel, the IPCC, sounds easier, the chief point made was the human-made effects are extremely likely to have been the dominant cause of the observed global warming since the mid-20th century. And further it says the continued emission of greenhouse gases will cause further warming and long-lasting changes in all components of the climate system, increasing the likelihood of severe, pervasive and irreversible impacts for people and ecosystems. I'm sorry, but what further evidence does one need? 97% of scientists agree that humans are causing global warming and climate change. Most of the leading science organisations around the world have issued public statements expressing this. So if humans are responsible for the current levels of global warming, therefore we are also responsible for fixing this problem. And indeed, after the recent bushfires in Queensland, the acting Premier, Jackie Trad, says, and I quote, "Climate change meant the state was facing a new era of fire risks. There is no doubt with an increasing temperature, with climate change, then what the scientists tell us is that events such as these, the recent bushfires, will be more frequent and they will be much more ferocious." This council can show leadership, declare a climate emergency and then give clear information about the most effective ways everyone can take action and the realistic outcomes to expect from these actions. Why are people in our community afraid about their climate future? Nikita, 18, from Ocean Grove. What do we say to her? Judy, who put the photo of her granddaughter here for us all to look at. What answers can we give these and many others that have contacted us over recent weeks? Why is there widespread feelings of helplessness? Why did over 2,000 or 2,500, whichever number you'd like, people march through the streets of Geelong last Friday? This wasn't about kids taking time off from school. Every section of our community was represented at that march. Mums, dads, grandparents, children, young and old, tradies, blue-collar workers, white-collar workers, professionals, many, many doctors, and even members of our own junior council. Are we going to ignore this march and those marches that occurred all around the country and indeed around the world? 4 million, we were told, 250,000 in New York. And that as well. This council has a history of listening to the people. And I use the goat farming in Lara that we dealt with as a council earlier. The people of Lara spoke. They didn't want goat farming at their back door. They didn't want them because of the health-associated problems, issues associated with the goat farming and the environmental impacts, amongst other things. So the troops rallied. They came to council many times, contacted the councillors by email relentlessly, and they won. Well, this is that on steroids. Health-associated issues and the environmental impacts that we're facing. Supporters have been to the council meetings and contacted councillors by any means possible. So I ask, why aren't they getting the same support? Why aren't they getting what they're asking for, and that is to declare a climate emergency? We're a member of the Municipal Association of Victoria, this council, and on the 12th of May 2017, they passed a motion that says, A, we are in a state of climate emergency that requires urgent actions by all levels of government, including local councils. and human-induced climate change stands in the first rank of threats to humans, civilisation and other species. And it went on. They're our representatives, State Council, and other state councils that have come on board and declared a climate emergency. Yarra City, Darebin, Moreland, Ballarat, Maribyrnong, Bringbank, Melbourne City, Mornington, Surf Coast Shire, Yarra Ranges, Cardinia, Port Phillip. Geelong should be there. Geelong should be standing alongside those city councils. And we've heard the number, let's say it's 50, let's say it's 60 by now, the number of councils that have come on board in Australia. And we've heard about countries that have come on board and supported. And to David Attenborough, he was quoted earlier, I'll quote him as well. If the current rate of warming continues, it is predicted that we will reach the threshold for permanent environmental damage within 40 years, unquote. We must all act now. We can't wait for federal or state governments on this. They are dragging their feet. We have this opportunity. Let's not waste it. A state of emergency must be declared. This is our moment. It has troubled me, this issue, troubled me more than I care to admit. What more do we need for a consensus, a total agreement around the table from councillors to declare a climate emergency? That's what troubles me. What further evidence is required for us all to agree on this? I was probably ignorant on some of this before I researched it myself. But I'm absolutely convinced it is time. It's time to declare a climate emergency from this council. And in summing up, I just want to thank Councillor Mansfield for her work on this, and Councillor Mason as well. Considerable work and obviously anguish that's been involved. So it's time. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
We'll kick in. There you go. You're on now.
Here we go.
Good luck.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move an amendment to the motion, please. And we have the amendment up on the screen. Thank you very much. Look, the key points are to acknowledge climate change and the urgent need for action. The new aspects are a request for a sustainability framework, implementation plan and measurement program to be brought to Council by February next year. So it's not a denial of anything, it's not a watering down of anything, it's providing more...
Mr Mayor, we warned earlier to please not be abusive and not to yell out. Everyone has the right to speak and it's given that right here. Please do not interject, let the people speak and hear what they have to say. If you're yelling out, you're not going to hear it. Let's give the respect for that.
It's not a denial of anything. It's not a watering down of anything.
It's not funny either. Thank you.
It's providing more substance to what has been proposed, and probably more importantly, it's the call for immediate action in a manner that more councillors can support than can support the original notice of motion. The bulk of the motion is the same. If you read through, the bulk of the motion is the same. It could even be debated that we're in some sort of furious agreement. But I'd like you to all read it, and I'd also like to say thank you, everybody, for coming along tonight and for standing up for what you believe in. Passion is really important to get things done. I'm also really passionate about climate change action. I'm also passionate about getting things done, and I'm also passionate about standing up for what I believe in. For the City of Greater Geelong to follow other councils with a climate emergency declaration now is just to tick a box and continue doing a series of ad hoc actions. Bear in mind that Greater Geelong doesn't even have a current environmental management strategy. It is under review, but it's not complete yet. So declaring an emergency in the absence of a solid course of action is premature. As councillors, we need to be more responsible and more considered in our decisions. There is no denial of the science. I totally support organisations like BHP coming out and declaring an emergency. They are ready. They don't make announcements without having done the work. When the work has been done at the City of Greater Geelong, we can think about making announcements. BHP were the first mining company to publicly accept the science around climate change. I was doing all their global sustainability reporting at the time. Since then, they've done world-leading scenario planning, climate change impact modelling across their global operations. They've got a comprehensive strategy, a whole of enterprise actions behind their declaration of a climate emergency. Council, meanwhile, hasn't even updated the environmental management strategy which expired in 2017. Now, that's not a shot at council officers. I did talk to them about this before I said this tonight. That work should have been ongoing. It was when the previous council was sacked and we had administrators in. So it should have been ongoing, and the revised strategy should have been underway from late 2016. Instead, that environmental strategy sat idle for 2 years and has only just been picked up this year. Yes, there is fabulous work being done at the City of Greater Geelong, but it is early days, and with all due respect, it's fairly basic and it's not organisation-wide. There is a mindset still that's largely limited to a focus on environmental impacts. The response to climate change impacts is a true sustainability issue. As you've all said, it's organisation-wide across the triple bottom line of social, environmental and financial aspects of the organisation. We can't respond to climate change without understanding the social and financial impacts. As several of you have pointed out, it is a critical risk, and by it, I mean sustainability and climate change as part of that. Governance is a more recent addition to the triple bottom line and probably the most important one to this council and what we're talking about tonight. That means measuring, monitoring and reporting on what we do. That is the point of a sustainability framework, an implementation plan and a measurement program. Our job as councillors is to set strategy and policy, preferably aligned to our vision and our council plan. This amended motion, acknowledging an immediate need to act with a clear and achievable strategic goal for the CEO and officers to deliver, is us doing our job as representatives. Simply declaring a climate emergency, which, like it or not, has become a political slogan, and self-congratulating over our environmental achievements, many of which are actually low-hanging fruit, is neither a mature nor intelligent approach. I think our council group can do better. The amendment is a beefed-up version of the original notice of motion. Despite the language being used, it is not watered down. I won't talk about the political nature too much, but Councillor Mansfield did say in bringing this to the chamber that the emergency declaration is not a political move, yet unfortunately the promotion about this notice of motion has become about party politics. It's on social media under the Greens Party banner. People have been categorising those supporting a beefed up amendment as Liberal, so it has become about party politics. Now, I stood on a platform of calling out party politics in the chamber, and I'm doing it right now. This has most definitely come to the chamber for political reasons. We've not had that happen with this council before. Now, I fully understand why this has been brought here. It is political, and I stand up for what I believe in too, okay? I stood for council to call out party politics, so I'm doing it. There's also the timing of this notice of motion, which is mixed in with the impending mayoral vote. That has muddled some loyalties and confused some people's logic. The majority of councillors had issue with the term emergency in earlier discussions. I was with Councillor Mansfield talking to Mick 8 on the Sustainable Hour, talking to the councillors about it, and most people didn't really support the idea of climate emergency. I've observed that the current in-house political landscape has bent some people's views. Some would say that's just politics. I call rubbish. I'm going to call it out. We are not ready as a councillor group to make a declaration, and the council as an organisation is not ready yet either. We need a proper report and a plan for what we're going to do. First things first. The comment that this amendment is watered down is actually quite ironic. The amended version is not watered down. It's got significantly more substance than the original, and it's about genuine action. The amended motion is about setting a professional, policy-based strategic direction. I completely agree that the words are important. It's about setting a framework for those aggressive targets we talked about. This is about presenting a non-political option for climate change action that more councillors can support. I understand there are a couple of councillors that can't or won't support either option, but I think the amendment covers most of us within the bell curve. That was the objective. The amendment is simply the original notice of motion without the politicised word emergency, but with a request for the substantial and strategic plan of action to be delivered by the CEO and team within the next few months. I understand that everybody here wants action. I'm also passionate about action to address climate change. It's what I do for a job. My job is sustainability reporting. I hold major corporations to account around their sustainability actions. In the past 5 years, I've done it for Deakin Uni, BHP, South 32, Australia Post, and I'm now doing it for Coles Group and Newcrest Mining. I don't attend political party meetings talking about slogans. I do the actual work. As Monica Coa requested earlier, this approach does... Excuse me, am I talking over you? I think I had the microphone. Can you please wait? Monica Coa requested earlier that this approach needs real action, and this is real action. I know you all want immediacy and a sense of urgency. Believe me, so do I. Local government is a notoriously slow-moving beast. It can be intensely frustrating. I do agree, Monica Winston, with that point. But Ron, in some areas, you asked about the sea level rise modelling. In some areas, some fabulous work's been done by the City of Greater Geelong, and this is one of them. So there are pockets of fabulousness in the City of Greater Geelong, but there's not a lot, and it's not very broad-based. To blindly follow other organisations who have more depth behind their statement and declare an emergency tonight would be a mistake. And it's a mistake because that would be the end of the action. There's simply not much else to back it up in the original notice of motion. Phil Bolsh is right. We need to look at this broadly in sustainability terms, not just about a singular piece. What we're asking with the amendment is for the City of Greater Geelong, through our CEO, to put together a framework and a plan of actual implementable action by early next year. It's about getting that evidence base that Dr. Joe Centro referred to. That is taking a leadership position. That is providing a clear and logical path for what we're going to do and how we're going to measure progress. Once we have that plan in place, we can then think about things like declarations. We need to walk our talk first. Now is simply too soon, it's too simplistic, and it's too shallow for all the councillors to support. This amendment is about providing a realistic, solid and immediate course of action. It's not just about grabbing a headline. I hope that when we're debating this amended notice of motion, that we can all remember to be kind. We all want a very similar end result. It's just being expressed differently. There's no need to be tribal about what we call it. I appreciate the debate will seem to be about semantics, so be it, but let's get on with some action, whatever happens. We need to do more than just a slogan and more than just a call to action. We need a plan for action. Thank you.
So I needed a seconder for that amendment. Seconded Councillor Grisbeck. Thank you, Councillor Grisbeck.
Reserve my right, Mr Mayor.
Reserve your right on an amendment.
Okay, I'll go for it. This notice of motion has been a personal journey for me. I've learnt a lot about community leadership, trying to represent all parts of the community. There's been some great examples of how activism can confirm people's views, and there's been some that it's been unsettled about the activism. The real issue before Council is not to debate the merits of climate change, because I believe it's real. I have been on as Councillor Murray has said, I have been on an information journey and finding out and listening to people. People have been sending me links. People have been sending me articles. I've been reading the science. So this has been not just something that has come in the last few weeks. This has been a journey since becoming a councillor. And my community has been very supportive of me and supplying me the information that I need. Whilst we have heard many other councils have declared a climate emergency, there is also many communities and councils that won't even debate it. Golden Plains won't debate at all. So we are lucky to be able to debate it. I am a mum. I am a mum of 2 boys whose lives have just started, although they think they're about 27. They're only 16 and 14. I also wonder what the world would be like in about 20 years. What I want to do is not just talk about doing something, but actually action things. I don't want to divide my community either. This amendment to the original notice of motion won't divide my community. In fact, they will be proud of us for actually putting in place sustainable and measurable plans. I don't think that Geelong should just be the same as all other councils. We are unique. What we have here is something that we can stand on our own 2 feet. This is a plan. I don't want it to be a plan that just sits on a shelf. There are many things that the state and federal government need to do, like a container deposit scheme. Let's learn to reuse, reduce and recycle. We have been listening to our youth councillors fairly intently over the past 2 years since we brought that into council. Logan, Carmen and Erin, Anthony and I have been meeting regularly, and I asked them, what does it mean to you as youth councillors? They have said to both Anthony and I that what they want is action. They said, we don't care what you call it. We just want to see that there is change and that we will look after our planet. So to them, this is what I say, that we will do something about it. My view is that the words do mean things, but one word on whether we agree or disagree is not where we should be. And as councillors, we should be held to that. We are committed to the Youth Council. We are committed that we have shown that since we've been elected. We are committed to hearing from the youth. I'm committed to hearing from the elderly. I'm committed to hear from everybody. This amendment actually provides priorities to develop a sustainable framework with actual implementation plans and performance measures that we will be held to account for. This amendment also asks us to advocate, and as suggested by the resident previously, we will ask our state and federal colleagues to take the next step on this issue, like the recycling, as I said. I am a mother, but this is not just about those who are parents, but all of our community need to do their part. If this is bigger than politics, then we would accept this amendment that has been put forward as an amendment sits across politics. This amendment is a place where, as a community, we can act. And what we want to do with our community is show that all parts of the community are heard. I believe in climate change. Let's vote about it, and let's not vote about one word. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Any other councillors no comment on the amendment? Councillor Mason, thank you.
Mr Mayor, I accept the science. It's not a matter of belief. Mr Mayor, I'm somewhat offended by perhaps a vague or tacit suggestion that I'm being political. I put this above politics, and I challenge anyone to prove otherwise. I've got friends who are Greens, I've got friends who are Liberals, I've got friends who are Labor, and they all support the idea of a climate emergency. I'm also disappointed, deeply disappointed, that such things as the COG, Environmental Management Strategy, is being attacked or observed as being ineffective. There's been a great deal of work done on that this year, and in fact it's been out for community consultation, and it's an inspiring document, and to say that nothing's been done is ridiculous. I accept that BHP, it's a wonderful thing. I accept a lot of the things that have been said. It's true. BHP have stood out, and they are one of the ones that have, in business, accepted that climate change is extremely urgent. I'm not sure if they've actually said it's an emergency, but I think they have. It's absolutely incorrect to say that this is a strong motion. The amendment refuses on 2 occasions to recognise an emergency. It's deleted the word. If we saw the track changes, emergency's been deleted twice. No recognition of emergency. It refuses to support the MAV declaration. As a sustainability portfolio holder, I'm uncomfortable with the approach of introducing sustainability issues, which are very, very much more complex than the original intent of this motion, which was to cooperate with collective coordinated action and a collective coordination plan for announcing a climate change emergency from which all other plans will proceed. Global best practices are demonstrably not understood by the people making this amendment. The sustainability framework should include consideration of the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals, of which climate change is only one consideration. This is not the time to discuss a broad-based sustainability framework, which should lead to a strategy and then to a plan, which ideally would be in our 2022-2026 Council plan. The 2030 SDGs involve 17 wide-ranging pillars. Those pillars include elimination of poverty, addressing health, hunger, education, housing, gender, water and sanitation and many other things. It's not just climate change. It's a much more profound, and I put it to you, that this amendment is camouflaging a very weak approach to a climate change emergency, camouflaged by trying to talk about wonderful plans in the future, which we should be approaching in a different way. It's improper. It's most improper to mix and confuse these two important issues. And as Sustainability Portfolio Chair, I say again, I'm completely uncomfortable with this. And I do foreshadow a more deeply considered sustainable development motion in the future. And I want that to be recorded. Consideration of a climate change emergency is a declaration is the intent. That was the intent of the original motion, to declare a climate change emergency. Nothing else, nothing more complicated. That's all for now.
Mr. Manone, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm a little bit bemused, I'd have to say. Over here. I'm a little bit bemused by the assumption that there's no emergency because Geelong hasn't got its sustainability framework up to date. I mean, I know for a lot of us Geelong is the centre of the world and it's a wonderful place, but it's not the centre of the world in everything. And just because we haven't got our sustainability framework in as good a shape as we're going to have it in, and I'm sure with some of the effects from tonight and these couple of excellent additions to the original motion, if we go down that track, I'm sure we're going to be a lot better placed. So I do congratulate Councillor Asher on those inclusions, but they could have been made and still actually acknowledge that we do have an emergency. So it's not an either-or situation, you know, and I think at the end of the day what we're arguing about here is some semantics of the word emergency, and we're getting plenty of evidence that there is an emergency. This is a good addition to the original in terms of its intent. But I really do struggle with the fact that there's no emergency because we haven't got our bookwork in order. Can I say that, you know, the science we've already talked about, so I won't go over and repeat that. I will say that, to my way of thinking, the world seems to be in continuous change. And it is totally irrational to think that, you know, we started the ice ages and, you know, we got to 2019 and we all expect that's going to be the end of the journey. I mean, clearly it's not. That's an irrational thought. The world's going to keep changing. And heavens knows where it's going to be in another 1,000 years. The question is, how much of that change is man-made? And the extent that some of it is man-made, how much of it can we slow down? Can we actually stop or maybe even reverse? I think, well, this is only a personal opinion. We're probably on a journey of that's not going to favour us in the next hundreds or thousands of years, but at least we can make it palatable for our children. So that leads me to believe what I think is the central issue here, and the other emergency that we have is an emergency to convince the people who can influence the change to actually go about putting the change in place. And there is no doubt that I think there are probably very few climate deniers in the world, very few, based on the evidence. But there are groups and parts of our population who have a very high degree of self-interest in the way the world is currently conducted. And we have to convince those people that even though change is going to be counted in the billions of dollars, the hundreds of billions of dollars I would suspect, the price of not changing will be measured in the trillions of dollars. And we need to somehow convince the people who have the self-interest in this area that change is going to be in their best interest. And if we do that, then maybe we'll see the change that we want. And look, I don't believe for one moment that we as a mankind lack the expertise to tackle this problem. We clearly have the expertise. And I'll give you a couple of quick examples. 50 years ago we put a man on the moon. 20 years ago we started taking the heart out of one person and put it in another. We clearly have the expertise in mankind to actually implement the change. But and when you look at, say, one of the major polluting areas is transport. Why are we all not driving electric cars? You know, it is only in very recent times that the technology has been developed for clean energy for cars. Now, that's something that could have been done. You know, surely we had the ability to do that before we had the ability to put men on the moon. It's a lot easier task. But we didn't do it. Why? Because we didn't have the will to do it. And I think self-interest has been a strong measure there. But there is indication that governments and commercial interests are starting to invest, but I just think the rate of change has been slow. I read just recently that 50% of the world today, clean energy is cheaper than fossil fuel in 50% of the world. That's a big step forward if that is in fact an accurate thing. The next 50% may be hard. We've probably picked off the easy 50, but let's get the next 50 done. So we're starting to move in the right direction. But clearly the population is getting concerned because there is a higher frequency of natural disasters happening in recent times. And I'm a great watcher of world news, and it's almost every other month that there's a disaster around the nation, around the world. There's clearly in some way evidenced infected by climate change. So somehow we've got to convince these people who have the capacity to implement the change, to get on with it. And what we've seen, I think, is the population have taken the lead here. And I think that may be the groundswell, maybe what ultimately will be the measure that drives the change that otherwise we haven't been able to have around the world because governments and commercial interests have been slow to move. And we've already heard about, the 4 million people in the world and the 300,000 in Australia and the 2,000 in Geelong. A part of that movement that I think that will force governments to move. During the last 2 years here at this council, the group of people sitting at this table have really embraced youth in our community. And you've seen our youth mayor today, and we've got a youth council. This is an opportunity for us to stand up and where our deeds can support our words. We've been verbally, we've been very supportive of them, but this is a way for us to show them that we really mean our support. They're crying out for our support, and I think we can do it. And finally, Mr Mayor, I note that our continent contributes a very insignificant percentage of the overall emissions in the world. I think it's as low as 1 or 2%. I could be challenged on that, although we do mine and export a lot of coal, so I'm sure that has effect around the world. But even though our percentage is insignificant, can I say to you as individuals and as a council, let our words not be insignificant. Let us bat above our weight and not be just a small part of the world. Let us actually have a say that might have an impact. So, Mr Mayor, I'm going to vote against this amendment, even though it's got some very good words in it, that hopefully will be part of our tenure going forward. I'm going to vote against that so that I can vote for Councillor Mansfield's original nomination.
Is that working? Yep. Thanks, Mr Mayor. Thank you to everyone who has attended tonight, and also for your excellent questions. And I also thank Councillor Mansfield and Councillor Asher for their respective notice of motions and also the amendment. I don't agree that we are going well in Geelong. I don't agree that we're going well in Victoria, and I can't believe you're clapping for us. Clapping for what? What, because we're going to perhaps put our hand up and say tonight we're going to declare a climate emergency? Big deal. You're being way too weak on us. Way too weak. Whether we declare a notice of motion tonight or tomorrow, we will be exactly the same tomorrow morning, and we still wouldn't have done anything to appease your real concerns with the climate. This perception that if we declare a climate emergency today, or if we don't, and the world's going to change tomorrow, doesn't wash. And this perception that if we don't declare a climate emergency tonight, that those of us that don't support that don't care for people, don't care for our children, don't care for the community, don't care for ourselves. That doesn't wash at all. I've been on council for 2 years with these guys. We're all the same. We all drove our cars in here tonight. We all drive to Melbourne every other day. We all printed our documents tonight. And you're going to let us off and clap for us. You should vote us all out at the next election. You should be preparing your campaigns tonight against everyone that's here. Don't let us off just because if the motion gets forward tonight that we've declared a climate emergency, if you're satisfied with that, you have gravely missed your opportunity. You need to hold us account to actions That's what you need to hold us account to. You need to make sure that we're reducing our waste. You need to make sure that we've got a sustainable recycling program in place. You need to make sure that we're investing in smart technology, including vehicles and the equipment that we maintain and that we operate in the field. You need to make sure that we are reducing our energy usage. Don't you want that? You're putting the thumbs down. I don't know why you don't want that. You don't want us to do that? Of course you would want us to do that, wouldn't you?
Councillor Contel,
so,
if you talk to the audience, they're going to respond, so please...
Yeah, well, I want them to respond. This is interactive. I want them to respond. That's what I'm here for. I've taken a lot of phone calls from many of you in the room, and I really appreciate all of you who have contacted me. And to those that I could get back to, I've tried to, and I really appreciate all of the feedback that you've given me. So there was many, and I applaud you for all of those who have reached out. The emails, where I could, I tried to respond as well. So I certainly appreciate the sentiment for declaring a climate emergency. But I don't think you're holding us to account hard enough for what you really want out of us, which is the actions. And what I would suggest is that there are many emergencies in the world that the world is exposed to at the moment. There's poverty, there's drug usage, there's a whole range of things. There's a whole range of things that, as a world, we need to be dealing with, and the climate is one of those. But just because we don't declare a climate emergency tonight, or if we do, what we really need to be doing is working on our actions. And Councillor Asher's amendment is trying to force us to actually take action rather than just voting and debating on whether it should be called one thing or another.
No, please sit down. Councillor Mansour, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think it might be helpful to go through exactly what this amendment says and do a bit of compare and contrast. I'm going to thank Councillor Asher for putting forward an amendment. And look, this conversation has been going on amongst councillors for months now. I have always, with my notices of motion, given other councillors plenty of opportunity to discuss things. There was a briefing organised by our officers on the implications of a climate emergency. We had plenty of opportunity to discuss different language and what language we could all live with. And this amendment was presented to us just under a week ago. So look, I think there have been other things said tonight that are, to be frank, quite disappointing. I'd like to continue to discuss the substance of the motions here tonight, and I'm just going to put some of the other things aside. The only thing I will say is I did ride my bike in tonight, and I'm 5 months pregnant, so... And I do regularly, if you ask any of the officers here. So if we start, and this is really where I can't support this amendment, and I'm a pragmatist. I actually could have lived with, if we didn't have the word emergency in here, I probably could have lived with that if we had something else that conveyed the gravity and urgency of the situation. I really could have. But let's go to point one. So, firstly, all references to any support for a climate emergency have been removed, including whether we even support the MAV's statement on climate emergency. We're just noting it in this amendment. So, point one is probably the thing I have the biggest issue with. It says, Council acknowledges that climate change poses a risk to the people of Geelong and Australia. There is nothing in that statement that conveys a sense of urgency. Councillor Asher did refer to urgency, and I agree with that, but it's not written in this amendment. Any reference to this being an urgent problem or anything different to business as usual, it doesn't jump out at me from this amendment. And look, as I said, I could have lived with something that said this is a really serious and urgent problem. We need to do more. Nothing in this amendment says that. There's no real equivalent sense to the word emergency. Hence why I put up emergency, because no one could present any alternative. That they didn't want crisis, they didn't want anything else that conveyed a sense of urgency. I was told that was alarmist and maybe futile. I don't know, but I feel that, and based on what the community has said, they want us to recognise that this is an urgent and serious problem. For me, this first line is a really weak statement, and I actually think it's a step backwards for us as an organisation. It's not enough anymore to simply say that climate change is a risk to our community. We already say that in just about every strategy and plan we have as a council. We already say that. We agree that climate change is real. We've been saying it for years. You can look at some of our current documents. We actually go further than this statement already because we acknowledge that climate change is already happening. I think a 2016 climate change adaptation toolkit, which we have as a council, makes a stronger statement than the line 1 here. So I have a real issue with line 1 here. I think, referring to it just as a risk would have been appropriate maybe 10, 20, 30 years ago, but it's grossly inadequate for the situation we now face. And I really think it shows that we haven't heard what the community are saying. So my biggest issue is line 1 of this. Now, there is a question of technicality under local laws about this idea of the sustainability framework, because I think this is a totally different concept. I actually completely support this and have said I'd be happy to include this in the original motion. It was only brought up, presented as an idea last week, but I think this is a great idea. I'm very happy to support this, but it's being presented as an alternative to the original notice of motion, as an amendment, as a change. So we can only accept this sustainability strategy if we remove all references to emergency or urgency. I think I'm happy to do this sustainability framework, but it's actually a slightly different topic, and I actually think it's worthy of its own notice of motion, and Councillor Mason's flag that he might bring something up in the future. So it's not a competing idea, they're complementary. I do take issue with the fact that the original one had no action behind it. There were actions. I don't know if any of the other... it's disappointing. This motion's been in front of councillors for a while now, and there are motions there, and we all actually talked about the kind of actions that the rest of councillors wanted and supported. We inserted things, including getting our CEO to report back to us within 6 months about how we're going to take action to reflect the climate emergency, how as an organisation, cutting across the organisation, we will elevate climate emergency as a strategic lens. We talked about things such as having climate emergency as something we report against on every single matter that comes before council. That's a simple measure that other councils have taken to do this, and there are steps in there to work with other councils. There are steps in there to incorporate climate emergency in all of our current plans that we are reviewing as a council. So to say it doesn't contain action is, I think, to be generous, misleading, but personally actually find quite offensive. There is action in the original motion. This sustainability framework's another action. Let's put it in there if that's what councillors want. But that's not what the people who are promoting this amendment are really saying if they want this amendment as a full package. They're not saying, we'll just add a sustainability framework in order to strengthen the amendment, as was argued. It's saying we're going to take out any sense of the urgency of climate change. Climate change will just become another matter that we deal with amongst all the other sustainability issues that we have to deal with as a council, which is where we already sit. It's business as usual, and the community aren't asking us for business as usual. So, look, I think... I don't know how much more I can say about this issue, except that this amendment is not what the community are asking for, and for me, it's really presenting a false choice here about choosing between sustainability frameworks and climate emergency. The original motion is pretty straightforward. It's, do we support a declaration of climate emergency? If you don't like the word emergency, propose something that at least conveys a sense of urgency and seriousness about climate change. There's nothing in this amendment that does that. So for that pure reason, I can't support this amendment. I'm all for collaboration. I wanted consensus on this issue. I thought we might have had it a couple of months ago, and then I was actually quite personally, really disappointed when there was a moment where I looked around the room and realised there was a whole lot of other stuff going on that I hadn't perceived, internal politics and other agendas and all sorts of things. And I went, well, this is what's happening at every other level of government. It's why nothing happens on this issue. So look, I hope that councillors will listen to the community and reject from what my perspective is fundamentally a weak statement on climate change. Happy with the sustainability framework, but the statement on climate change is weak. And instead we need to show some leadership and show support the climate emergency declaration, or at least a declaration that this is a serious and urgent threat that we're facing. But I'd say to the community, thank you so much for turning up tonight. Please don't be too disheartened if the outcome isn't what you're hoping for. One thing I've learned, particularly through this process, is that the community united is much bigger and more powerful than this council. And by working together, you are capable of making a significant change, and it's your advocacy and hope that's given me the motivation to continue to work through this process here, which certainly hasn't been easy. And look, the flip side of this is if we do declare a climate emergency tonight, further to what Councillor Contell says, your work is by no means done. This is just a starting point for a process. And your continued advocacy is going to be what's needed so we make the necessary changes and to hold us to account.
Councillor Nelson, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Where do I start? I don't want to... Okay, it's obvious that we all believe in climate change. We all believe that. I dispute what Councillor Mason says, and says that some of us here don't believe in climate change. It's pretty obvious that we all believe in climate change. You've had your chance to speak, now it's my chance to speak. Please don't be disrespectful. I said, you've had your chance to speak and now it's my chance to speak. Please don't be disrespectful. I think ratepayers expect councils to be leading practical action on local environmental issues and focusing on things they can address locally. Local government plays an important environmental role managing waste and recycling and maintaining local areas. I think it's what we do in local communities that we most likely see from our local councils, and that's what my constituents want from me. With regard to what Councillor Mason was saying about the United Nations, yes, there is a Climate Action Summit. The Climate Action Summit in 2019 states, and I can quote this, "Thankfully we have the Paris Agreement, a visionary, viable, forward-looking policy framework that sets out exactly what needs to be done to stop climate disruption and reverse its impact." Councillor Mason is again right with his regard to speaking rights at the United Nations, but is wrong in his reasoning why. The reason why Australia can't speak at the United Nations is because the world's biggest polluters, China and India, will not let us speak. Mr Mayor.
Keep going.
Council has a range of climate mitigation and adaptation programs underway as we implement the City of Greater Geelong Climate Change Adaptation Strategy, the Zero Carbon Emission Strategy, Environmental Management Strategy, and I'm proud of what this council has done thus far. As Councillor Mansfield has said, everything we can do will make a difference. The City of Greater Geelong is working towards a circular economy, but we can't do it alone. There are three things that are our bread and butter here, and that's roads, rates and rubbish. I'll repeat what I said. There are three things here that are our bread and butter, and they are roads, rates and rubbish. And what...
Please just
there are three things here that are our bread and butter, and they are roads, rates and rubbish. What we need is waste security. As everyone knows, we're having real issues with our waste. We need people like Andy Medic, who's here tonight, to support this council and not sit on his hands and advocate for the portion of $600 million that the current state government has and fast-track a waste solution for Geelong. We need your help, Andy. We need it. Thank you, thank you. We need people like Andy that can make a difference at the state level to support us at the local government level to fix our recycling crisis. Thank you.
Councillor Nelson. Any other councillors to make comment? Councillor Sullivan. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to say that I believe that this council has and continues to take steps to protect its environment. As noted in this motion, we have a strong record of taking steps to reducing our emissions, restoring and conserving our biodiversity and preparing our community for the effects of climate change. This is proven not only in our updating of the environmental strategy, biodiversity strategy and our urban forestry strategy, but by our commitment to our zero carbon emissions strategy and our community zero carbon action plan. The City of Greater Geelong is not ignorant of climate change. Council established its first climate change adaptation strategy in 2011. And that strategy was built on the back of the Greenhouse Plan of 2007. There are no climate deniers in this room. I believe this is a progressive council, and we've been operating in this area longer than most. The idea or notion that the City of Greater Geelong has its head buried in the sand and is doing nothing is wrong. And I look forward to correcting that. Now, we said that the issue of climate change is bigger than politics, and everybody in the gallery agreed. Well, I agree with that, and we should do more. And I look forward to incorporating climate change impact mitigation into the city's strategy and operations across the entire organisation.
Any other councillors to speak? Councillor Aiken.
No, I said, do you want to go first?
You don't get that choice, Councillor Aiken. I'm asking other councillors if they'd like to speak. Sorry?
I'm not supportive of this amendment, and you know, over the last few days, you sit the two of them down together and you try and work out what's the difference between the two of them, and to me it comes down to the climate emergency words, and to me that's what the community have been asking for, is to support them. Is to support them in a declaration of a climate emergency. And as Councillor Mansell has said about Councillor Ash's amendment, the paragraph about the sustainability strategy is good, but I agree, that should be something away from this debate. That should be something that stands alone by itself, not thrown in with the climate change debate. And I think, and I've got the zero carbon emissions strategy here, and in it says the City of Greater Geelong was one of the first local governments in Australia to adopt a climate change adoption strategy and continues to implement best practice programs in this field. And it goes on and speaks about the low carbon growth plan, the greenhouse response and the current zero carbon emissions strategy. And on page 8, it speaks about climate change and it says the City of Greater Geelong accepts the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and consensus that human-induced climate change is real and the associated impacts will have an effect in the region. And those impacts include higher risk bushfires, more hot days and heat waves, fewer frosts, lower average rainfall coupled with an increased intensity of storms, higher sea levels leading to a greater likelihood of coastal inundation and erosion across the region. So that's a current strategy that we have that identifies the issues that we're really talking about. But of course, it doesn't have those words, climate emergency. And I think that's what the community wants. And I'm supportive of Councillor Mansfield's motion.
Now the councillors to speak. Councillor Aiken.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. Look, it looks like my vote's going to decide what's actually happening tonight, and I actually do wear that responsibility as a councillor, and I actually probably recognise that in the last few days. I actually want to first congratulate both Councillor Asher and Councillor Mansfield, because essentially both of them have elevated the discussion about climate change to a new level that we've never done in the city of Greater Geelong before. And my observation of how local governments dealt with this issue is it's actually been very divisive in the council environment. And in fact, what has happened, it has either been a win or a loss. There actually hasn't been an attempt to try to take the majority of councillors along in this particular journey and process. 6 or 8 weeks ago, I would have clearly been supporting climate emergency as a councillor, and that reflected my personal beliefs that I've never actually questioned the issue about climate change. I actually do understand, and the evidence is well there, that there is a total imbalance in terms of human participation on Earth and the natural environment, and that imbalance is actually shown most significantly by the climate change that we are facing on Earth. And so as a consequence, my default position would have been I would have just been seconding the motion and trying to get over the top of Councillor Mason to be closest to this particular issue. What has happened over the last 6 to 8 weeks is that I've actually been reminded that I actually am supposed to have an open position as a councillor. In fact, the legislation actually states that all councillors are supposed to enter into this chamber and have an open position before they actually reach a conclusion. There's actually legal precedent, which is known as the Winky Pop, which actually says that councillors are not to voice their opinions on this issue before they actually get to the chamber. That actually does show that they don't have met the legislative requirements to have an open view on this issue. So what I've done during the last 6 to 8 weeks is actually had an open view about the issue, and I know we have been told tonight that, and the representation tonight is actually predominantly from the community that actually says that we do have to declare climate emergency. All councillors actually have been contacted in the last 6 to 8 weeks by other members of the community who are deniers, who actually don't support climate emergency and have actually called on us as councillors not to even acknowledge climate change. And that made me actually think, what is leadership? What is leadership and my responsibility as a councillor? And I could actually participate then in my default subconscious position, which was to actually support the motion of declaring climate emergency straight away. And that, eventually then didn't sit well with me, because I actually said, this is actually the most significant issue that we face as human beings on Earth, and that is the issue of climate change. And if we continue the politics of division, which actually says, essentially what we're saying is that a decision of the majority should influence the minority. And that's exactly what the Declaration of Climate Change at this point of time would have done with this particular council. But what did happen was that Councillor Asher has in the last few weeks put up an alternative to actually put a capacity for every single one of the councillors that sit around this table to actually support climate change. And actually not... What is actually being proposed tonight is actually a resolution which actually says every single councillor can actually support the principle that climate change is of significance and does deserve significant attention of the council. And so then I actually looked at, should I actually then make a decision, and listening to the debate tonight, that should I make a decision to actually support the division? Because clearly what it would do, if a climate emergency was adopted by this council in tonight, it actually would create division and leave behind those councillors who do not support the climate is an emergency at this point of stage. And what Councillor Asher has attempted to do is actually put forward a resolution that actually takes every single one of the 11 councillors on the journey of climate change. And what it also does, it actually talks about, in item 3, the request for the Chief Executive Officer to actually undertake the development of a sustainability framework plan. But the significant thing it also does, it also says it calls on the CEO to actually look at potential additional measures. And what I certainly be looking for as a councillor, that report actually comes back and it says the additional measure is to declare a climate emergency. And I think that all the difference between what Councillor Asher and Councillor Mansfield is actually suggesting is they're both actually agreeing to the same thing. They're both identifying that climate change is the most significant issue that we're dealing with as a council. They're both actually saying that we do have to have an action framework which to be undertaken. But what the difference is that Councillor Mansfield has actually put forward a motion which actually gives the capacity for all 11 councillors to participate in that process. I think that is real leadership on this particular issue. I think that is the leadership why we have had the division in our community for the last 40 years, because the division has been what people have actually focused on. They have focused on a winner and a loser in this particular debate, and the reality is we are all losers unless we do something about climate change. And I'm not going to support the motion at this time, which actually causes a decision of the majority imposed on the minority. What I want is that every single human being and every single member of the City of Greater Geelong actually understands they have a responsibility and they have a need to develop their own action plans. And I'm actually very confident that if Councillor Mansfield's motion is actually put in place, each 11 councillors will work, if Councillor Asher's motion is actually put in place, that every single 11 councillors will walk away here from tonight and develop their action plan, and the CEO will have a clear directive from this council in relation to what is the expectation in terms of actions associated with climate change. And I do believe that we will reach the conclusion about climate emergency. And it won't happen tonight because I won't be voting for it, but I certainly will be expecting the CEO to come back in February or even earlier, because that's actually the last date we're actually asking it to occur, to come back. And one of those additional measures will be that he actually says in his response to ensure that the council measures and actually puts in appropriate action plan, it does need to be declared an emergency. And the journey, and look, I want to congratulate those councillors that this is a tough and personal issue for them to actually reach the conclusion to actually decide climate change is a significant issue. It's an easy issue for me to decide because I've never questioned it, but I can assure the community that there have been a number of councillors that this has actually been a journey, and this has been a significant point where all 11 councillors tonight have now acknowledged that the issue of climate change is one of the most significant issues, if not the most significant issue that we are confronted as councillors. And I commend what Councillor Asher has put before us, and I will be supporting that consensus and that leadership that Councillor Asher has shown on this particular issue to ensure that 11 councillors are brought forward on this issue, not 6 and not 5. Thank you, Councillor Asher.
Thank you, Councillor Aiken. Just in closing, I'll make this very succinct because we've heard a lot tonight over quite a period of time. One of the things that we really pride ourselves on as a council is listening to the community. It's been one of our mantras from the start. We've had some really good debates, and the vote is the vote, but we've always listened to the community, and I think tonight's another good example of that, allowing the community to come in, have their say, whatever that might be. We take that on board. So thank you for that. Quite simply for me, my own view is, I think there is an emergency occurring within our community. And I state that, I won't go into my background about environmental work, but I have, I guess, walked the walk is what I would say. Some like to write about it, some like to talk about it, some like to do something about it. And quite simply, we're being asked, if the notice of motion is very simple, we either think it's an emergency or we don't. I'm going to put it to the vote. Those in favour of the amendment? Those against the amendment? The amendment stands. The amendment is successful.
We have a division.
We have division?
We haven't voted on
That's enough. Thank you. Thank you. Division's been called, so those who support the amendment, Councillor Aitken, Councillor Grisbeck, Councillor Contell, Councillor Asher, Councillor Sullivan, Councillor Nelson. Those against the amendment, Councillor Mansfield, Councillor Harwood, Councillor Murray, Councillor Mason and Councillor Manane. Thank you. We will move on with the meeting.
Don't we have to vote on
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry? Righto.
Glad you didn't.
It automatically becomes a standing motion. No, thank you. We're done. We're moving on to section B of the reports. Thank you. Yeah, we did. Thank you. Thank you.
Are you kidding me? How about Steve?
Up there, mate.
Go on, Steve.
Steve, any water? You're a bit dry there.
Right, we'll regroup and continue the meeting. Thank you. Section B, the reports. Item 1 is the Youth Council third report for 2019. Moved Councillor Grisbeck and seconded Councillor Murray. Thank you, Councillor Grisbeck.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. As we heard tonight from the Junior Mayor Josie, the report is that they are going tremendously well and they're in the planning works for their Youth Summit. I think we have all been involved in the mentoring program that comes with the Youth Council, and that was part of the reason why originally we agreed to the Youth Council was to hear from them and ask them to advise us on issues. This Youth Council's been working with a great purpose and a format, and the outcome of the Youth Summit will be a really reflection on how they have been travelling. I'm pleased to say that both Councillor Aitken and myself have taken some time to meet with our junior councillors. I find the sessions really informative. I find them that we are able to mentor them on some of their things like we actually talk about all things, not just council, and it's been a real reflection that they have come to the meetings with questions for us about democracy, about the governance. They've come to us with questions about rubbish and rates and roads. So I think that, you know, they are a true reflection about how we are travelling as a city, and I think that we should continue with the Youth Council. I think it's an exciting part of what I'm proud to be part of, including the youth voice is really exciting for me. So, Mr Mayor, I put the report to the councillors for approval.
Councillor Murray.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Grisbeck, and truer words. And it's going to be interesting for the Youth Council with their summit, and I think they've identified climate change as one of those topics that they'll be addressing. So, indeed, the youth voice that we listen to, and the youth being the true reflection of perhaps what the youth believe and say out there. Be interesting to see what comes of that. But Jo, she's so impressive as a junior mayor, and yeah, very supportive of this. It's a great initiative.
Any other councillors make comment or speak? Councillor Mason, thank you.
Nothing much further to add. That I'm also very impressed with the quality and capacity of our youth council, and I've been very much involved with in the mentoring of our local Bellarine 3, and we've been able to discuss topics in a friendly and relaxed way, freely, frankly, and with respect. So I'm very interested in the drop-in youth groups that they've been talking about, and their youth summit sounds very well organised. So I'm looking forward to the results, and perhaps maybe our youth will continue to take a lead ahead of its council.
Councillor Mason, any other councillors to make comment? If not, I'll go back to Councillor Grisbeck to close.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I think what we will hope to achieve from the Youth Council is to actually recognise that we have future leaders in our community, and I'm hoping that once they get the ripe old age of 18, that they will put their hand up and see that this city of Greater Geelong, these councillors, are something that they want to aspire to be like. I'd like to also thank the officers in terms of their support for the Youth Council, and we've had the privilege of working with some of the officers, some new to the City of Greater Geelong, and the dedication that they show to wanting to show the children exactly how democracy works and wanting them to have leadership skills. I think the officers have got to be congratulated, and thank you, Mr CEO, for that, the support of the Youth Council. And I think it's a strong youth support team in terms of the youth in Geelong as a whole. Pure examples of that are things like the Fort, and Danny, especially down there at the Fort, does an amazing job with the youth in the north. So thank you, Mr Mayor.
Recommendation to vote. Those in favour, those against, that is carried. Now, I'm just conscious of the time before we go to item 2, and I would not want to be in breach of the Local Government Act, so I need to get a mover and a seconder so we can continue past 10 p.m. So move Councillor Sullivan, seconded Councillor Contell. Those in favour, those against, thank you. And if you're on live streaming, stick with us. We're nearly there. Your item 3.
Take the mic to the toilet with you, Councillor Pat.
Item 2 is Little Mallup Street Central Activation and Improvements Proposal. Move Councillor Contell, thank you, and seconded Councillor Murray. Thank you, Councillor Contell.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Look, as we are aware, the utilisation of the Little Mallup Street area, which the mall is located on, has for some time now been an area of concern. And whilst there has been some focus on there from us over the decades, there's no doubt that the community is increasing in concern, and particularly we're at boiling point some 3 or 4 months ago in articulating quite strongly that they didn't feel that the space was delivering a safe and inclusive area for the community to be able to congregate or willingly visit. So on the 25th of June, with the support of all the councillors in the chamber tonight, including Councillor Pat, who's not in here right now, we were able to move a notice of motion on that night which requested that Council work with a number of stakeholders, including Vic Police, the traders, property owners, and also the community at large, to identify some short-term, medium-term initiatives that would activate that space and endeavour to try to build and develop an environment that was of a safe nature and a welcoming nature. We also requested that the CEO work on some costs and timelines that would be able to see us initiate some initiatives that would activate that space prior to Christmas this year. Now, there's been some great work done over the last couple of months in a very short period of time. We've held meetings with all of those stakeholders that I mentioned earlier on. Equally, through social media, there was quite a number of individuals and groups that contacted us and me as an individual, which we passed on to officers. As far as I'm aware, most, if not all, of those who contacted us via social media directly asking to be spoken to have been spoken to. There's a number more that came through this week, which I'll be passing on as well. But the intent was to take back ownership of the mall and really to install some consistent and continuous activation initiatives into the mall so that it was a more engaging and safe environment. It was also about driving out those who choose to congregate and impose violence and intimidation and fear into the general community that would dearly like to use that space for general socialising and just a place to gather and enjoy themselves. And so the mall had been and has been taken away from us under difficult circumstances, and it's not one that we're going to put up with any longer. So tonight's report provides us some options to consider, and essentially the notice of motion, the report is asking us to consider option B of the report, which drives a number of things, including rezoning the area into 3 specific zones. That would then see us be able to have a live entertainment area with a stage, which would also enable us to continue to work with a whole range of community groups and service providers so that we have, as best as possible, continuous activity in that space and allowing people to be able to come and watch music, comedians, artists of all sorts of professions and disciplines, and creating real activity in that space. There'll also be work done to immediately, and I know this will please many, particularly Councillor Murray, to remove the toilet out of there. I think Councillor Murray's comments was that he wanted a Caterpillar D10 to drive through that toilet, and if I can help in any regard in that with the company I work for, I will. Getting the water feature back working, improving the amenity through improved furniture, increased lighting and security, and a whole range of initiatives to quickly take advantage of the low-lying fruit that we are able to access to try and get this mall very quickly into a position where at Christmas time not only will we have the wonderful Christmas spirit in town, the floating Christmas tree, but the mall will also be once again owned by the people of Geelong. Now, obviously, the initiatives that are in here are not a silver bullet, but they were never intended to really be of a strategic nature. They were more so a call to arms to actually initiate those activities immediately or as quickly as we possibly can so that the community can start to use that area. In the long-term future, there are obviously other possibilities for the mall, and we have a plan that's budgeted to be drafted on that, and we also know that there are developers that are looking at different initiatives that I'm sure that they'll be talking to us about to consider for that space in the future. And whether it's, as Councillor Aitken has said in the past, whether it's a mall or something else in the future, that remains to be seen. But we have a space there at the moment that we must act on, that we must do something with to stop the poor environment that we currently have in there. And I think that the report and the work that's been done to prepare the initiatives that are in the report has been good, given that the small amount of time that we've had. So I do thank the officers that have been engaged in this process and thank them for trying to listen to the community but also get the voice of the councillors. And there was a number of meetings held to allow us all to put our ideas and voices forward, and I think that that's been reflected in the report. For me, the most important thing is that we have people in there, that we have good people in there, good community groups with activities that children and families can come back and use on a daily basis, and that's what will create the safety and security in that space. With that said, I'll leave it to others to contribute further to the discussion.
Thank you. Councillor Murray.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Contell. Summed it up pretty well. It's just there's a few things I just want to add. In a media release on the 28th of February, Council, in collaboration with the Geelong Authority and Revitalising Central Geelong Partnership, stated that they are all committed to improving the Mall area and all consider it a high priority. So this piece of work that's going to commence within the weeks is very important, and as Councillor Contell has said, broken into 3 areas: live entertainment, a meeting place, relaxing and eating, and the third place to incorporate children's play space. And that's on top of the current program of activation already undertaken by the Council and the Central Geelong Marketing Committee. There are approximately 350 activities across the Central Geelong area per year, delivering 900 on-street hours of activation, reaching 250,000 people. And in addition, there is also more than 140 fundraising activities that are run across the Central Geelong precinct. And what is important is, in the recommendation, is 9.6, to maintain ongoing dialogue with key stakeholders and users of the Little Mallup Street Central, to constantly review the activation of the public realm in Little Mallup Street. And discussions have been held with Market Square management, which is so important to the success of this, property owners and some of the business operators in this section of Little Mallup Street. There's been strong support for action to be undertaken in this space. But you mentioned the lighting, didn't you, Councillor Contell? The current lighting levels and energy efficient lighting will be used to replace for new lighting features and existing upgrades. And of course the reinstatement of the water feature and the toilet gone. So all good news, and look forward to the rebirth of the Mall.
Thank you. Other councillors to make comment? If not, before I go back to Councillor Councillor Grisbeck, yeah?
Sorry,
you're right.
I should have put it up a bit higher.
You're right.
One thing that I've been quite critical about on these types of things is the effect on the budget. I did speak to Mr. CEO today and am assured that this financial year it is a smaller amount in which we're going to be implementing. So I just wanted to make sure that we are trying to be fiscal with our surplus. On this, I think that the smaller amount of approximately 30-odd thousand in this financial year is appropriate, and it's not eating into our surplus too much. So thank you, Mr. CEO, for that clarification.
Councillor Mansfield, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I'll just, I think, add to Kylie's comments there. I was one of the councillors who strongly supported this, this request for some initiatives for them all in the first place. But I guess I have had to think quite carefully about whether the current cost is justified. We didn't, this is something that is out of in between budget cycles. But I guess the flip side is this issue is going to keep coming up for us as a council, as it has for a long time, and if we just kick the football further down We'll just be dealing with this next budget. It is a relatively small amount. We do have to be mindful that we are eating into our surplus, and as an organisation we face a number of major financial risks, particularly with respect to the waste and recycling. But look, I think relative to the sort of costs we're facing there, this is fairly small. It's not eating into a huge amount of our operating budget, so I think it's justifiable. And as one of the ward councillors, I really welcome this initiative, and I look forward to getting some hopefully positive feedback from the community and other stakeholders about what's going on there, and we can learn some lessons and hopefully really add some life into that part of Geelong.
Thank you. Nelson, thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I certainly agree with certainly what most councillors have said thus far about the mall. We need to get it re-engaged with people, and one of the main things we can do to do that is what Brisbane Mall did probably about 20 years ago or so now, and that was to introduce free Wi-Fi in that area, and that just brought a heap of young kids in there just to sit there and play on their devices, and uni students to study, and that was at all hours of the day and night. So perhaps we could also look at doing that. It's a pity we can't get option A of having little movies there. That'd be good. But bringing back the water fountain made me think of having a look at some photos I was doing on the weekend from my grandparents. I was cleaning out some stuff, and I found a postcard that my mum had sent to my grandparents because we moved to Geelong and they stayed in Melbourne. But it was I think it was about a 10-page spread of different parts of Geelong, and one of them was the mall. It was our showcase. And it had the big fountain there, and then on to the left was Brash's. Remember Brash's, Mr Mayor?
Bought a few records there.
It was on the
Councillor
corner there.
doesn't remember Brash's.
And what that actually showed was, this was before Market Square was there, what that actually showed was, I'll get to my point, was there were shops facing the mall, and now the shops aren't facing the mall, and as soon as we can do that and activate those spaces, whether they be little cafes or whatever, people have got so much money these days they can eat out all the time, apparently. According to officers, that's the case. But if we can activate those spaces and have the shops facing outwards rather than inwards, I certainly think that'll go a long way to fixing the mall's problems.
Councillor Nelson, I'll just make a couple of quick comments. The mall is a much maligned space as such. I was across the road with some former colleagues earlier today, and they were giving me some crime statistics and activity statistics there, and it's incredibly low, the actual crime rate there, if you can use the word crime on occasions. But that aside, and I've said this a few times now, people just don't turn up in the mall and they're suddenly behaving badly, or just because they walked into the mall. We have alcohol and drug issues, we have mental health issues, and sometimes these are the root cause of a lot of our antisocial behaviour. They come from different areas where they haven't come from, perhaps a good home environment. They've got issues there. So all these are compounding when they come to an area like the mall, and for some reason, at different times incidents occur, and it's not just the mall. This is a Geelong issue. It's a global issue about these particular antisocial problems that occur. It's not just the poor old mall that we keep blaming time and time again. It's a great space. I walk through it daily. There's a lot of good people in and around there, and every now and then, we get one that wants to play and be a bit loud, and all hell breaks loose. But I'm all for any activity that we can increase in there, increase the beautify the environment, or make the environment more welcoming, so we can decrease some of that antisocial behaviour. So I'm all for that. Councillor Grisbeck to close. Oh, I'm sorry. Councillor Contel to close. Sorry, Eddie.
Yeah, that's okay. Thanks for everyone's comments. I agree with all of them. Understand that people are a little concerned about the funding. I really do feel in this case the community will, if not thank us, will be pleased that we are doing something and do need to take some action. I take on board the Mayor's comments about crime. I'm no statistician and I don't understand how all that's measured, but I can assess that I believe many people would staying away from the mall, in fact, because it's such a intimidating and and poor environment. I know many people do, so that might be one of the reasons. But one of the things that we have spoken to officers about, and I'd like to make very clear, is that we're very mindful that the activities that we are going to put into the mall to activate that space, we're going to be very mindful that they are not in competition to businesses and traders that are in the area. We understand there are hospitality outlets in that area, and we want to be very mindful that these are to complement what's already there and to encourage others to tenant the buildings that may still be available. So we're really looking at complementing what's already there.
Councillor Contel, I put that recommendation to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? That is carried. Thank you. Let's get Councillor Pat, if he's... Where is he? Got the form guide.
Hey, Z. I'm on him.
What is it, the trots? Very good. Item 3 is the Amendment C395, Settlement Strategy in Northern and Western Geelong Growth Areas Framework Plan. Moved Councillor Mason and seconded Councillor Aitken. Thank you, Councillor Mason.
Just before I formally begin this, Mr Mayor, I'm quite... on this occasion, there's been so many amendments we've had to put from time to time, but I'm happy that this one will take some of the load off the Bellarine if we facilitate it quickly enough. Anyway, formally speaking, the primary purpose of Amendment C395 is to introduce a new local policy in the Municipal Strategic Statement section of the Geelong Planning Scheme so that the settlement strategy and the North and Western Geelong Growth Area Framework Plan can be implemented. So we need to consider submissions received from exhibition. They will then be referred to an independent panel appointed by the Minister for Planning. Mr Mayor, Council adopted the Greater Geelong Settlement Strategy on the 9th of October 2018 and the Northern and Western Geelong Growth Areas Framework Plan in March 2019. Following extensive exhibition, 61 submissions related to the framework plan and 27 to the settlement strategy, while there were 14 submissions relating to both. Officers have considered and responded to all of the submissions and formed the basis of the City's position to the independent panel scheduled to be held on the 11th of November 2019. Mr Mayor, the submissions range through issues of population growth rates, activity centres, the creative corridor, city shaping strategies, and even Ocean Grove. Others involve settlement boundaries, logical inclusions, and the distinctive area landscapes of the Bellarine. 6 government agencies also made submissions generally supportive of the settlement strategy and amendment, though some large organisations made submissions, including Boral, which was surprisingly supported by the Victorian Planning Authority. The settlement strategy considers the need to increase the level of affordable and social housing within the municipality. This is reflected in the policy changes proposed by the amendment. It also provides a clear framework to deliver housing in Greater Geelong into the future. Having this robust housing strategy avoids the risk of ad hoc reactionary planning and missing opportunities to deliver the clever and creative vision. The settlement strategy has a number of environmental implications, including the need to consider environmental risks and values, the spatial distribution of housing, sustainability and one planet principles. It also bases design on increasing the share of housing provided by urban consolidation, reducing pressure for outward expansion and increasing diversity. The Northern and Western Geelong Growth Area Plan is a high-level land use plan to guide future PSPs within the Northern and Western Geelong growth areas. It also aligns with the planned sustainable development strategic priority of our council plan. Precinct structure plans will be informed by detailed technical studies for each precinct and they may include recommendations that deliver from directions in the framework plan. Changes might include land uses on the framework plan, potential biodiversity conservation areas, and sizing of drainage and transport infrastructure. The framework plan identifies actions to prepare an environmentally sustainable design action plan for each PSP. Mr Mayor, council officers will endeavour to resolve submissions wherever possible in the lead up to the panel hearing. The City has given careful consideration to all of the submissions, and other than some negotiated outcomes which the City does intend to embark upon, will recommend no significant changes to the independent panel hearing. This hearing could run for 3 to 4 weeks. The legal fees have been budgeted for and are likely to be in the order of $100,000. And I recommend the motion.
Motion, Councillor Aiken.
I'm conscious of the time, so I'll actually be very, very quick. This is actually the next step in terms of the planning process. Essentially, the settlement strategy, which we adopted in October 2018, and the Northern Western Growth Zone framework plan, which we adopted in March 2019, we're referring to an independent panel. And that should commence their hearings on the 11th of November, so we're asking the Minister to actually do that. 2 other comments I do just wish to make. Can we check that the lady who asked the question tonight is actually a submitter? Because if she is, she actually has the right to be heard during the directions hearing of the independent panel, and I would be encouraging that lady to actually speak to her position if she has if she is one of the 100 and whatever it was, submitters that we had in it. So if she is, please encourage her and also advise her that she will get an opportunity after tonight's decision to actually be heard before the panel. And the other thing I actually like to make is that I hope Jude Munro is actually declaring potential conflict of interest. Jude Munro is actually the chair of the Victorian Planning Authority, and she's the chief monitor in the city of Greater Geelong. And if she hasn't declared an interest on this particular issue, it is a significant governance failing that's actually occurred. I did not think it was. If she has declared it, I congratulate her. But she does wear 2 hats, which actually has the potential to actually put undue pressure under officers within the city, and I'm pleased that they've responded to that in the manner in which they have up until this point of time. And I do encourage that if the VPA actually goes before the independent panel, which they have a right to actually do, that the chair actually does declare before that panel as well too her dual roles that she does have.
Councillor Mansfield.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, I don't disagree with the points that have been made. I just think the resident who asked a question tonight about this issue raised, I guess, a broader point about community engagement and, in particular, the use of interpreters. And I think, as a city, that might be something to take on board with with seeking feedback. I think particularly as we start to expand in the north, where we have a lot more residents from non-English speaking backgrounds, but elsewhere in Geelong, it's not a problem that's unique to council. I know that in the hospital system, use of interpreters is something that isn't as routine as it might be in some of the Melbourne metro hospitals, and sourcing interpreters is actually quite difficult in Geelong because most of them will travel from Melbourne and there's cost issues in it, etc. But I think it's a really valid point around interpreters using materials in other languages, ensuring that we are really meaningfully engaging with the community, and I guess I just think I'd just like it noted that that's something we should really be reflecting on as an organisation more broadly with our community engagement.
Councillor Mansfield, any other comments? Councillor Grisbeck, thank you.
Just quickly, I agree 100% with Councillor Mansfield around the access to information is really important. And if you can't understand it in the English language, we should try and help those that need it. So completely agree, and just wanted to put that on the record. Thank you.
If there's no further comments or questions, I'll go back to Councillor Mason to close.
Nothing further to add, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Mason. I'll put the recommendation to the vote. Those in favour, Those against, that is carried. Thank you. Item 4 is the fees and charges review. Moved Councillor Manane and seconded Councillor Murray. Thank you, Councillor Manane.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This report provides councillors with details of the review that was completed by the CEO and management on council's list of fees and charges. The need for this review became apparent when all significant increases in our fees and charges that were included in the 2019-20 budget were actually not included in reports that were provided to councillors, and subsequently were not documented in the budget papers in a transparent manner for the public. So that's what's brought the review about, and I think we're all aware of that situation, especially the high profile event of the parking. The review has identified 630 fees and charges, and we did actually determine that 46 of our fees and charges actually had significant increases, and the significant increases we ended up categorising as 10% or more, and obviously 10% of a small fee and 10% of a large fee are different amounts, but we had to come up with a number. We thought 10% was adequate. And also 33 new fees that also had not been communicated in the budget papers. So it's been a really worthwhile exercise internally for better process. Having said that, the majority of these fees that come in the significant increases category or the new fees category are in primary services where council in the main are acting in commercial and competitive markets, and management believe that the fee increases are reasonable and meet the market. So that analysis and examination has been done. The review itself has also indicated or identified some key improvements for the process going forward, and also will bring about increased transparency for the public. And those key improvements are listed at 10.1 to 10.4 in the paper. I won't go through them all, you've got them there to read. But worth just highlighting 10.1, all fees and charges will be transparently disclosed both to the budget papers, to councillors, and also in the budget documentation. That's what we want to go forward in this area. So thank you to management for the review and identifying in a very transparent way what the current situation is, and hopefully we move forward with transparency.
Councillor Manane, Councillor Murray.
I agree with all good points that Councillor Manane has raised. There's certainly, at the time, this was a PR disaster with the way this came about. But we've moved on from there, and this is why this report's before us tonight. So it is proposed to disclose all fees and charges in internal briefings and public budget documents in future, which is helpful. The review found the city considered a total of 1,630 fees and charges during the 1920 budget process. But the key word, I think, and Councillor Pat mentioned it, is transparency. And that's, I think, what this report is all about. It recommends that Council reiterate that transparency of decision-making is a key priority and the expectation of the Council and CEO. Mr Mayor.
Councillor Murray, any other comments or questions? If not, I'll go back to Councillor Manane to close. Thank you. Nothing further. I'll put that recommendation to the vote. Those in favour? Those against? That is carried. Thank you. Item 5 was the Privacy and Health Records Council Policy Adoption. Moved Councillor Murray and seconded Councillor Grisbeck. Thank you, Councillor Murray.
Mayor, this report, the Council has recommended to adopt the Privacy and Health Record Council Policy and revoke the existing Information Privacy Policy and Health Records Policy. The two existing policies on the management of health and personal information were adopted by Council in 2015 and due for review. The City has benchmarked the current policies against legislative obligations and better practice guidance materials and has applied guidance from the Office of Victoria Information Commission. The report states the new Privacy and Health Records Council policy combines the information privacy policy and the health records policy to simplify the approach to managing personal and health information privacy. According to this report, the policy improves openness and transparency, there's that word again, by assisting individuals to understand their rights and how the city manages personal and health information. It's also said to provide a clear process for making a privacy complaint and how to inquire about privacy matters or the privacy complaints process. Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Councillor Grisbeck.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Conscious of the time, thank you to Rebecca Leonard and her team for this particular update, and it's bringing us in line with the Office of the Victorian Information Commissioner, and that we are that the City of Greater Geelong take privacy of both our records and our community very highly. Sorry, we we take it very seriously, I should say, and we highly regard people's privacy. So thank you to the team.
Any other comments or questions? If not, I'll go back to Councillor Murray to close.
Mr Mayor.
Thank you. I put that recommendation to the vote. Those in favour, those against, that is carried. Item 6 is a confidential matter, so I need a move and a second to move into confidential. Move Councillor Grisbeck, seconded Councillor Mansfield. Those in favour, those against, that is carried. Thank you. Okay. Section C done. Section D, Assembly of Council. Move and a seconder, please. Move Councillor Grisbeck, seconded Councillor Mansfield. Those in favour, those against, that is carried. Thank you. And the planning delegations, move Councillor Mason, seconded Councillor Asher. Those in favour, those against, they are carried. And a mover to go into confidential, please. Move Councillor Contell, seconded Councillor Asher. Those in favour, those against, thank you. We're moving into confidential.